So, how does it feel when you play Roll Up to Win with Tim Hortons? Buy a hot or cold beverage using the Tim's app and find out. Roll in the app for a chance to win prizes ranging from free coffee and donuts to a Universal Orlando resort vacation or a sweet car. Oh, don't forget the TV. And this year, every roll is a shot at a $1,000 daily giveaway drawing for two $500 prizes. Roll up to win and get treated by Tim's. No purchase necessary. Account registration required. 50 U.S. and D.C. 18 plus entered by 4/2/23. See rules at rolluptowin.com for free entry and full details. Void in Florida and where prohibited.
At Kroger, we want our fresh produce to meet your expectations, which is why we're dedicated to doing up to a 27-point inspection on our fruits and veggies, checking for things like scarring. In fact, only the best produce like zesty oranges and crisp carrots reach our shelves. Because when it comes to fresh, our higher standards mean fresher produce. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
And right now, stock up on your favorites during the 10 for 10 sale. Mix and match participating items and get 10 for just $10 with your card. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
The following is brought to you by the Social Suplex Podcast Network.
This is Speedball Mike Bailey. You're listening to Keepin' It Strong Style. Yes.
Yo, this is Rich Latta from One Nation Radio. This is brought to you by the Social Suplex Podcast Network. We present to you the Ace of Podcasts, Keepin' It Strong Style. Let's go. It's the Ace of Podcasts, Keepin' It Strong Style. Covering New Japan, they ready to hold it down. Jeremy Donovan and the young boy Josh. Come and hit a job out and bury all the frauds. From the Tokyo Dome over to the G1. Social Suplex is the network where we can get it done. I'ma chill and let them have it, cause this is just an intro. Keeping the strong style, 6 stars from the get-go, boy. Yeah, from Tampa Bay to the Tokyo Dome, this is Keeping It Strong Style with your hosts, Jeremy Donovan and the young boy Joshua Smith. And thank you for listening.
Welcome to Keeping It Strong Style, the Ace of Podcasts on the Social Suplex Podcast Network. Jeremy Donovan here with the young boy Josh Smith. On today's show, we'll discuss New Japan Cup and cover all latest news in the world of New Japan Pro Wrestling. Please support our show by subscribing and following the Social Suplex Podcast Network or Keeping It Strong Style on the podcast app of your choice and leaving a rating and review. You can also get all the podcasts over at socialsuplex.com. Check out our Pro Wrestling Tees store, prowrestlingtees.com/socialsuplex. That's where you can get your official Keeping It Strong Style t-shirt. If you enjoy this podcast, please consider making a one-time or monthly donation by visiting socialsuplex.com/donate and click on the donate button under the Keeping It Strong Style logo. This week's episode is brought to you by the NJPWEXT, the only browser extension for NJPWWorld.com. Frequently updated and with features like dark mode, improved translations and layouts, custom and share playlists, synchronized viewing parties, and much, much more. It takes NJPW World to the next level. You can visit njpwext.us today for details. Young boy, should people be allowed to bet on wrestling?
Listen, wrestling isn't wrestling unless people are allowed to gamble on said wrestling, okay? Because otherwise, what the fuck are we doing?
I don't know. It's just watching wrestling without any stakes.
That's bullshit. Okay, listen. The history of professional wrestling is entirely predicated on the idea of the workers and the promoters being able to swindle money out of the mark-ass viewers who think that they're smart, but they're not smart. And you do that by putting the fix in with the house and taking everybody's money and then moving on to the next town before anybody realizes what you've done. That's what wrestling is. It's the one thing that's been missing from wrestling. And I, for one, am glad that they're bringing this back to the forefront, you know, much in the tradition of our forefathers, like Frank Gotch.
Back to the carnival days, back to the roots.
You know what they used to do, Jeremy, sometimes? Like, and this is just one trick amongst many, many tricks, but they would do something like this. Like, they would go to a town, carnival days, and they would have a challenge. And they'd put a real shooter in there, right? And the challenge would be something along the lines of like, if any man or any woman or whatever in this town can last, let's say 5 minutes with our champion, we'll pay them X amount of money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they'd have everyone keep trying and they can't do it. And then they have a plant in the crowd. And the plant is part of the wrestling troupe, but they make it seem like he's a local kid. You know what I mean?
Like when we saw Kylan King in the crowd.
Yeah, like when we saw Kylan King in the crowd, she was a plant. And then what happens is after a few people can't do it, they send the kid in there. You know, they think he's a no-hoper or whatever. Maybe he's really jacked, who knows, but gets in there, and guess what? He lasts the 5 minutes. Not only does he last the 5 minutes, but he puts the champion in trouble towards the bottom of the stretch. So after the 5 minutes is up, the champion basically, you know, is angry, cuts a promo, and said, and you know, they're paying the kid, and as the kid's walking out with his prize money, they say, whoa, come back here on Wednesday. We're going to do this again. This time it's going to be a real 2 out of 3 falls, blah, blah, blah. Now everybody's like, oh my God. And then they start gambling. And guess what? Whichever side the people think is, and usually it's the hometown kid. That's where the good odds are. That's where people put the money in. And then guess what? The promoters and the wrestlers, and they all think that, by the way, they think that this is a legitimate sporting contest. They like UFC. It's like betting on the UFC is what they think they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then they turn around and they put huge amounts of money on the champion. And guess why? Because the whole thing's a fix anyways. It's a work. It's a hippodrome, as it was known back in those days. And they make money hand over fist. And they take all that money, and before anybody wises up to what they did, including the police and the sporting commissions and yada, yada, they move on to the next town. Nobody's the wiser. And they would do this all year round. That's what wrestling is.
Yeah, I mean, a business full of carnies, still is to this day.
Yeah, absolutely. My only thing, and I guess I don't know why we're talking about it, because it doesn't really pertain to New Japan, but you know, since you brought it up, the only thing that might be good about it is the idea that like WWE and Vince McMahon and them would have to hypothetically pick a booking decision and stick to it, and they couldn't deviate or change their plans one way or the other whatsoever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no more the plans change, pal. Like they have to kind of be locked in, or else people are going to be on the up and getting on the betting, and you're going to have creative team guys and wrestlers all switching their bets the last minute.
But with all of the A, there would be leaks no matter what. B, there would be changes. C, there would be fraud. Like this whole thing just seems rife with too many issues. I think it would fail one way or the other. So
Yeah. Well, enough about betting and what's going on in WWE. Let's talk about New Japan Pro Wrestling. Have this New Japan Cup tournament that's been going on, and we had a question from Rambone Slam Pig, and I want to give a big shout out and congrats to Rambone Slam Pig. Got married this past weekend. Rambone has been supporting this show from pretty much the very beginning, so shout out and congrats on this marriage.
Congratulations, Rambone Slam Pig. I mean, I've said this before. I don't know what the listeners look like most of the time, and in my mind, like when I hear that name Rambone Slam Pig, I still think he's one of the bad guys from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Because it just, I don't know, that name just sounds like that to me. But he has been, in all honesty, one of the most supportive listeners that we have for this podcast and the show. So congratulations to you on your marriage, and best wishes, best luck, and all the good things in life.
Yeah, so he asked us, and it's kind of catching up from last week's New Japan Cup matches. He says, Yujiro versus Shota was dreadful. I don't think Yujiro is the right veteran to work with a promising young wrestler who is trying to get their feet under them and put it all together. Who on the roster do you think best fits that sort of role currently?
That's a great question. I would probably say Tomohiro Ishii.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some good answers you could definitely throw out there. I mean, I think Will is a guy who elevates almost anybody he works with, but for me, if we're talking about like the aged veteran that can teach the kids and really push them and bring out the best in them, I feel like it's still Ishii's like the guy that fits that role the best. Maybe Nagata.
Yeah, I would say Ishii and Nagata are probably, number 1, 2. You can throw in Satoshi Kojima. You can throw in, I think even Hanma at times could be that good hand to work with a young guy.
Speaking of which, bro, I'm going to throw this this is off subject, but this is a little hot take. Tomoaki Hanma, candidate for most improved in 2023.
What?
I'm not joking. You think I'm joking? I'm not joking at all. Have you been watching any of these undercards?
No, I've been mainly watching the tournament matches.
Hanma he'll never be what he was prior to the injury. But compared to what he was when he first got back, and I know it's been periodic, like he's just been like, increasingly getting better and better. I'm at the point now where I feel confident to say Tomoaki Hanma is good again. Tomoaki Hanma is good. He's very good. And I think he's a candidate for most improved this year.
All right, well, we'll put it down, see if it continues throughout the year. I mean, we saw the death match last year, that the tag match, and he was awesome in that match. And he's kind of had these kind of flashes of brilliance throughout the year since he's returned from injury, where it's like, man, like he's almost back to what he was before, or kind of these great, really, underdog performances.
He's doing something. I don't know if he's on the gas or if he's got like an incredible, I don't know what the deal is, but he's back.
That just reminds me of the BTE with Lethal and Cody. Dream, you on the gas?
Dream, you look so good there, brother. You on the gas?
Oh, man. Also, I think Suzuki is another good guy that's kind of age veteran that could really, handle and really teach a young guy in the ring.
Here's the thing, and I guess this is the more pressing thing. Who in New Japan isn't a good veteran that can't lead someone to a good match? And I feel like, Yujiro's on the very short list of individuals who probably fit that mold. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And here's the thing. I could even take that back. I think almost all the veterans have something to offer. Like, let's say if they're working with Lions, right? That's something different. But someone coming back from excursion that you're trying to establish as a top guy and you're putting them in main event spots, you don't want to put them in there with a Yujiro or a Fale or, Naito. There's certain guys who just, it's not going to work with them.
Yeah. Let's move on to some questions here from Def Triangle 720. He says, how do you feel about the tour so far, and how do you feel about it compared to last year?
Very, very interesting. I'm a little mixed, to be honest with you. So this is what I've been doing, Jeremy. Today was like a marathon session of like, it's been kind of crazy. Like I've been, oh man, I don't want to ramble too much, but I have so much to say. I feel like Stone Cold Steve Austin for the first time in my life. Okay. And what I mean by that is I remember growing up and like the things I liked about Stone Cold was how badass he was and everything. But the thing that never resonated with me the way it did with most of Middle America was him sticking it to his bosses. But I understand why that resonated now because I feel oppressed by my job and I'm trying to push back on them as much as I fucking can right now. So without going into a lot of detail, I'm maxing out my OT. And along the way, not only did I have a busy work day, but we had this podcast and I've been behind on New Japan Cup. So it was like a marathon of like getting all my work done and trying to squeeze in like the last 3 or 4 nights of New Japan Cup today. So it's been kind of exhausting, but, as far as the tour goes, it is mixed because if we were just grading it in terms of a tour, I think the tour is going really well for a lot of reasons. But it kind of depends on whether or not you're ingesting the undercards or not. I'm playing those on like 2x speed just to kind of get a feel for what's going on. Plus, it helps me when I'm like working. I don't have to pay attention to those matches quite as much. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot going on. Not like because obviously we're out of the pandemic, so that's a plus over the last couple of years tournaments. B, we got cheering crowds. We've got a lively environment. We've got Kevin Kelly and friends on, the call most nights. And then they're doing a really great job on the undercards, building to the different feuds that are going on, whether it's Leo Rush versus Hiromu, the Bullet Club turmoil with ELP and David Finlay, or even like the tag team issue that's coming up between Bishamon and Aussie Open, and all that stuff's really good on the undercard. Combining that with all the preview tags that they sort of just have peppered in, and this is something we've always said is really good about, say, like the G1. They're doing it with New Japan Cup, where it's like, it's not the same, the undercards don't just feel like superfluous, meaningless, exercises in futility. Like, they actually have a purpose, they have a story, and they're doing a really good job previewing the different things that are occurring throughout the tournament. So from that standpoint, it's very good. And I would even say the tournament itself is a mixed bag. There's some matches that haven't been great, but there have been some that have really exceeded expectations. But I would say, if you're one of those individuals who are just tuning in strictly for tournament matches, and you're trying to scratch that New Japan great match itch that you probably started to get a hankering for around Wrestle Kingdom time, this probably isn't doing it for you the way that some of the tournaments in the past have. Again, not to say there hasn't been some quality here, but I would say right now, compared to like last year's tournament, I think the actual tournament matches themselves are underperforming, comparatively speaking.
Yeah, and for me, I too also had a very busy weekend. I had a work trip in Clemson, South Carolina. Friday, Saturday, didn't get back till Sunday, and then Sunday was my wife's birthday, and doing stuff on Sunday and Monday for her birthday. So that left me in a spot where, I was just kind of having to watch all the tournament matches. So that's for me. I've pretty much just been focused on the tournament matches, kind of skip through the undercard stuff. And so, compared to last year, as you mentioned, somebody who's just watching the tournament matches, I would say last year from a in-ring quality is ahead of this year. But there still has been some really good matches. I mean, you think last year, you had Will Ospreay, Zack Sabre Jr. in the quarterfinals of the tournament. Right. And we haven't really gotten that. And that was like almost a 5-star match. We haven't gotten that yet at this stage in the tournament. We're just now kind of crossing into the quarterfinals with the shows that happened this past week. And so we really haven't gotten that big match of the year contender, or this big, great matchup that everybody's talking about yet.
I would also say this, compared to my expectations on paper from when we previewed the tournament, there are multiple matches that have exceeded what I was expecting just in general. So I am somewhat pleasantly surprised that some of these matches, we'll get into the review here, but some of them have been much better than I anticipated. But again, when we were doing the review, it's something I brought up multiple times. I was like, there isn't on paper a lot of exponentially great matches, it would seem. They've kind of over delivered on that, but initially that's not what I was thinking it was going to look like. At the same time, there are some pretty important narratives and stories that are being carried out throughout the tournament, and that's nice. But some of it is surrounding characters and individuals that I'm kind of second guessing and questioning whether they deserve the added extra attention that they're getting right now, as opposed to some of the other members of the roster. Mm-hmm. So again, like I said, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. And then the other thing too is when the matches are bad,
they are bad.
They've been pretty bad.
Yeah.
Although even, I'll say this too. I think, here's what I think. I don't think most of this has been as bad as the scores that you would see on Cage Match would lead you to believe. And I know that I'm sounding like a New Japan shill by saying that right now, but I feel like after 5, almost 6 years of doing this podcast and the voice that we have in the community, I've earned enough, and we have earned enough like reputation to be able to kind of give a little bit of a deferring hot take and still have some credibility. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's not something we do very often. But I'll say this, for instance, the evil matches. Now, I'm not going to tell you go out there and watch them, that they're really, really good, but the grades they're getting are like 4 and 3 and yada, yada. And the reality is, I don't think they're that bad. Most of them, I would probably be giving a solid 3-star, maybe just sub 3-star. And that's not me advocating for them in any way, but I think that there's an outrage right now where people want New Japan to be back the way that they've always envisioned New Japan to. I think that there's like a what is a romanticizing of what New Japan was even during its peak, quote unquote. You know what I mean? During the like 2018, 2016, 2015 years, people act like this element in New Japan didn't exist and wasn't a huge part of the company's booking. And it always has been. I mean, yes, House of Torture is very egregious, but before it was House of Torture, it was Bullet Club. And before Bullet Club, it was Suzuki-gun. And before Suzuki-gun, it was LIJ. And before LIJ, it was Chaos. And before that, it was Great Bash Heel. And this has always been a thing, that there are top heels that literally only win by cheating and having tons of run-ins and tons of ref bumps. And, you know, it's sort of a thing. It's like this trope that we've always like discussed. But people are getting sick of it. And I think that even though the matches themselves are fine, there's a swing in the other direction where people are like, we don't want, and same thing with like Yano comedy. There's like a very vocal group that are like, we don't want the House of Torture shit, and we don't want the Yano shit. And so they're just going to down vote and downgrade anything they have, even when I think the matches are probably, you know, they're nothing that you need to go out of your way to watch if you're, you know, cherry picking, but they're not as bad as these 4 and 3-star scores. Or I'm sorry, like, you know, the cage match scores, which is like a 4 is like a 2 and like a 2 is like a 1. And I don't think that they've been that bad, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's been, I think, probably difficult for people who want that kind of high quality because, you know, you come off Wrestle Kingdom, off the Kenny and Will stuff, all the great matches happened there.
Yep.
You roll into New Beginning, the Okada Shingo stuff, and there were some other great matches, the Hiromu Yo. There were some great matches on that tour, and then even Battle in the Valley, once the production got fixed, there were some great matches there as well. And so I think people are kind of like on a roll and want that to continue. And they're not quite getting that with New Japan Cup, but also, too, you got to think back on the history of the New Japan Cup. This tournament has not always been about great matches or let's have the most great matches. That's more of a G1 kind of thing. Where the New Japan Cup, it's more of let's build somebody, let's create a story, a narrative, let's get the guy, let's put a rocket on somebody and tell the story and build this person up for a potential title match down the line.
Yeah, not only does it generally build up new title challengers, it usually creates new storyline elements for the, you know, second quarter of the year. And you're absolutely right when you say it's not just about, you know, being this all-star tournament the way that the G1, you know, round robin climax is. But at the same time, you kind of do have to question, should it be? Like if, like for instance, last year, they were almost every, you know, they had the largest field they ever had. And you could easily predict where the tournament was going because they just had all the stars meet in the middle. And that was a huge, different, like, you know, that was a break with what they have typically done with this tournament, with the way it's booked. And this year seems to fall a lot more in line with classic New Japan booking when it comes to the New Japan Cup, where there are upsets and there are, you know, some stars, but there's a lot of young, fresh talent that are getting, you know, new title opportunities and new looks and everything like that. But at the same time, I do think that New Japan is in a bit of a transition phase. You know, there's people, including this podcast, but other smart individuals that have been saying for a while now that there is a transitionary period taking place in the company where, and you can see it, we've got new groups, new factions forming, dissension amongst groups, people leaving the company, different people moving into different roles within the company as well. And so I am wondering if some of these wrestlers that we're used to seeing go at a certain level are not able to necessarily do that or do that as often. And then at the same time, you're bringing in a lot of young, fresh guys from Excursion who haven't quite had those same experiences yet. So there's also a learning curve that way. And so we're very much transitioning into a whole new era of New Japan. And I'm not saying that people need to, I don't want to like discredit their frustration with the company, because I think some of that's valid. And some of the things I'm bringing up are probably things that the company needs to evaluate and try to overcome if they're going to capitalize on this renewed interest in the company coming out of Wrestle Kingdom. But at the same time, it is a bit of a reality in that, like, they've got an aging, declining roster and young, fresh-faced talent that haven't gone through the same kind of ring experiences that someone like, say, Tomohiro Ishii or Hiroshi Tanahashi had.
Right, yeah. And, we've been talking about it with all the guys that could be featured that are not, like all the LA Dojo guys. Like, there's a ton of guys that you could easily replace somebody like a Yujiro with a Alex Coughlin or a Clark Connors or somebody like that, and easily end up having a much better tournament.
That's true, but then again, it's a cost benefit. You have to weigh the pros and the cons when it comes to something like that. So let's say you do we'll use the individual that you chose, Alex Coughlin, who we are both very high on. We really like the guy a lot, and you put him in there, and he's going to come in for one night to replace Yujiro, and he's going to lose to Shota Umino. That would be a really awesome opportunity for him, but it's one match, and then you have to use him the rest of the tour in undercard tag matches. And I don't know if the benefit of paying for him to come out all the way from America just for him to have one match, one sub 15-minute match with Shota Umino just to eat a loss is going to be beneficial to that level for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess also, you're looking at the business versus entertainment side of thing. Yeah, so from an entertainment factor, yes, Coughlin versus Umino would definitely be more entertaining than Umino versus Yujiro. But yeah, from the business side, is it cost effective? Yeah, to fly out some of these LA Dojo guys, to have them potentially just lose in the first round, and they're in a bunch of undercard tags the rest of the tour. Is that worth the cost where you can just save money, use a guy like Yujiro who's in Japan, he's in the country, he probably has a better contract deal than some of these LA Dojo guys, and so it's probably a cost-saving measure there.
Right. Like, we don't know we're not privy to their contracts and dates, but it's like you already have Yujiro, you probably have to pay him. So, I mean, you probably have to use them because of that reason as well. So, I don't know. I mean, would I love for them to bring in a Gabe Kidd or what have you?
Even like Filthy Tom guys, Lawler.
Yeah, Filthy Tom or something, and put them in the tournament. Yeah, but then we would be complaining. I mean, that's why we call them pin eaters. There has to be guys that are in the tournament that are designed to take the losses early on and can afford to do it. But at the same time, you want those matches to be good as well. So it's a delicate balancing act. And at the end of the day, yes, there was a lot of flack that was given to Shota Umino for that performance against Yujiro. We reviewed it last week. But I do think he's doing really well in the multi-man matches and on the undercards. And that's something that he's been excelling at the entire time since he returned. And, I think it's one of those things, again, where it's like, if you're, I don't want to say a casual fan, because I don't know how many people that are tuning in for these types of matches are quote unquote casuals, but there is a difference between just cherry picking certain tournament matches versus if you're actually watching the product as a whole. And there are people that are ready to already write off Shota Umino based off the Yujiro match and based off the Naito match. And I get why, but I still think there's a lot of upside with the kid from what I'm seeing on the undercards. And I mean, look at where we're at with Wato now. just now, 2 years into the Watto experience, maybe 2.5, I don't know, maybe 3. He's just now starting to come into his own. And I'm not saying it should take that long for someone like Umino, but it's not something that happens overnight as much as we'd all like it to be. Not everybody that returns from excursion is Hiromu Takahashi. Those are rare.
Right. Yeah. And I think the tough thing for Umino is, he's really under a magnifying glass here. I mean, they gave him the big push. He has the Tanahashi, Naito, John Moxley look. Like, he has so many top stars that he's compared to and people want him to be like. Of course, he's not hitting the mark being a Tanahashi or a Naito or even a John Moxley right now. And he's still trying to figure things out, kind of trying to, come into his own. And I think he's doing very good. And so, but people want him to be great. They want him to be throwing out 5-star matches. They want him to be the next coming. They want him to be the next ace. And maybe he won't be the next ace. We don't know, but he's definitely not there yet. But he is progressing. Like you said, in these multi-man matches, he has a lot of fire. He's looking really good. And we'll talk about him and Narita against Tanahashi and Okada. I thought he looked really good in that match as well. You go back to some of the Ospreay matches. Of course, it's Ospreay, but still, I thought he did his load in those matches, especially the November match from last year from a historic crossover. So I thought he looked really good in that match also.
One thing the company's doing really well, though, is they're taking these noticeable deficiencies, and Kevin Kelly specifically, I don't know if it's a directive from the company or not, but it seems to be in the booking that they're telling this story, and he seems also to be highlighting it, as well as Chris Charlton, and they're doing a fantastic job is explaining how he has every, the old reference, he has all the tools. But he's falling short right now, and but in these matches, he's doing everything in his power to try and overcome this perception to prove that he's really a top guy, even if right now he's not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, I mean, I definitely think that there are issues somewhat with New Japan's way of promoting and booking talent. I think that they sometimes definitely drag their feet and miss the mark on certain guys by being too conservative when it comes to elevation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing a little bit of that already with Narita and Umino, and it makes me a little hesitant for when they're going to bring back other guys that are like Tsuji and Yumura and stuff like that. But with that being said, there is precedent in the past. You look at Tanahashi and his trajectory, and I mean, it was always clear that the company had high hopes for him and big plans, but he had many a fall and many a stumbling block before he became Hiroshi Tanahashi, living legend, guy that's going to save the universe, the ace of the universe, once in a century talent. Like, that's not who he was for many, many, many years in this company.
Yeah, you watch some of those recommended matches from back in the day, and those crowds were booing him sometimes, depending on who he was facing. He was not as over as you would think that he was back in the day when he was up and coming.
Even in the Wrestle Kingdom 3 feud with Muto, which probably was his real true coronation, crowd was split.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that everything with Shota Umino's for sure going to work out. We don't know. But I think that people that are speaking his demise are maybe a little too short-sighted. Maybe they'll be right, but I mean, I wouldn't bet on that just yet.
Yeah. So moving on, question from Grunty Dog. This is on commentary this week. It was revealed that Kevin Kelly hates the term banger when referring to a good match. Hanare agrees with him, but Jeff Cobb likes the word. Where does Keeping It Strong Style fall in this debate?
I don't know. I mean, I saw Kevin kind of give his greater explanation on this, and he doesn't necessarily like to adopt terms that just fall into the popular zeitgeist. Things that are overused become like too cliche, and he doesn't want to be a cliche. He doesn't want to sound like everybody else. So that's kind of his reasoning. But we say banger on this show pretty often, but I don't know. I don't really, I've never thought negative one way or the other. I mean, honestly, I feel like we borrow pretty liberally from people that influence us and, different individuals that we listen to when it comes to talking about wrestling and, just discussing wrestling within certain terminologies.
Yeah, we've used the term lots of times on this show, and I don't know, it's just something that became popular, and you hear other people say it, you say it, and so yeah, it's just kind of something that's become kind of part of the modern day, wrestling reviewer lingo, and so yeah, I mean, I have no issues with the word, but I do understand Kevin Kelly's standpoint on it, and yeah, not kind of wanting to just kind of blend in with the crowd and to kind of stand out, but. Yeah, I would say Keeping It Strong Style is pro the word banger for describing a good matchup. Next question from the Dark Soldier. He says, I think the best announced duo has been settled. Excalibur and Taz? Nah. Ian Riccaboni and Caprice Coleman? Nah. Michael Cole and Pat McAfee? Nah. It's Kevin Kelly and Jeff Cobb. Would you agree? I learned so much from Cobb on commentary. He's a wise man.
I don't know what he's referring to specifically when it comes to Jeff. But I did think Jeff was very good on commentary, and I don't want this to sound, I don't know what the right word is. I don't want this to sound negative, but Jeff has a reputation as not being necessarily the best promo.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, we've mentioned on the show before when he cut some of those backstage promos.
Right, and sometimes they're good, and other times they are kind of missing the mark. But when he was on commentary, he was really incredible. I think he's one of the best commentators they've ever had, honestly, when it comes to wrestlers making that transition. I like compared to Hanare and who was the other one?
Chase Owens.
I'm just tired. Yeah. And I thought Chase was okay too, but compared to Chase and Hanare, there was something wrong with Hanare's mic. It was like super low. You could barely hear him.
I don't know if the mic was super low or he was just super low.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess if he's not screaming. But yeah, Cobb was hilarious.
Yeah. We're used to Chase Owens. I think Chase is great. Like, he just has these great, like, one-liners. But, yeah, Cobb, I thought, really did well and really kind of stood out among this trio of guys that were rotating in and out for this tour. But, yeah, Cobb, he showed a lot of personality. He was hilarious. And, I think if he kind of leaned in more to this, commentary personality in some of his promos, I think it would kind of help elevate some of the promos that he does. Well, now let's start talking about this past week's tournament action here. So we're picking up from night 3. This was March 8th. On the undercard, we had Shota Umino and Yuto Nakashima defeating the TMDK team of Kosei Vegeta and Zack Sabre Jr. Had the Bullet Club team of Chase Owens, David Finlay, El Phantasmo, and Kenta defeating Just 4 Guys. We had a question here from Green Plasma _49. Why is Riley Vigor known as El Phantasmo despite being Canadian and never having wrestled in Mexico?
I think he was a masked luchador.
I only know him from Rev Pro. I haven't looked in to see what he's done before that.
Yeah, he's got a Lucha de Apuestas record where he had a mask. So,
well, there we go.
Yeah, it'd be like why is I don't know what Sami Zayn's real name is, but
El Generico.
It's like why was he known as El Generico when he's Canadian and he's never wrestled in Mexico? To the best of my knowledge, it's like he's El Generico, bro. He's El Phantasmo. That's why.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? It's wrestling. Why is my nickname the Young Boy? I'm not a young boy.
Also, with this matchup here, we got kind of the first interactions with Bullet Club teaming up with David Finlay. ELP does not seem down with Finlay being a part of the group, and there's been a lot of miscommunications between them and just kind of, him not really falling in line with what, Finley's doing.
Yeah, night after night, there's definitely tension. They keep trying to get the team to cohesively come together and do the too sweet, which he's very reticent to do that. There was a moment where one of the nights, Kevin Kelly was able to actually ask El Phantasmo what the deal is. And he said that there was an agreement amongst the Bullet Club members that they weren't going to jump Jay White out of the group. They were going to let him ride off into the sunset.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Finley came out and jumped him. And then now he's part of the Bullet Club. And then, that kind of led Kevin Kelly to be like, but he wasn't part of the agreement because he wasn't a member of the Bullet Club. So how are you going to be mad at him for doing that? Which begs the question, was there an agreement afoot between, most likely, let's say, Gato and David Finley prior to him jumping Jay White, or did they strike a deal after he made his move on Jay?
Mm-hmm.
And and that's kind of the crux of what ELP seems to be bothered by, because he's like, things are fishy. I don't know what the time. He's like, I don't know. It's like when people are dating and then they break up and then one of the people finds a new boyfriend and you're like, or a girlfriend or whatever, and you're like, that was a little
too quick.
It was a little too quick. I feel like there might have been some overlap there.
All right, yeah.
And that's kind of what's basically David Finley is the new boyfriend
for Gato.
And it seems like there might be some overlap between David Finley and Jay White. It's hard to tell, but that and ELP's very suspicious about this. And I also think he's probably somewhat taken aback and angry because, not only are the ideals of Bullet Club in question, but he seemed poised to be the next leader, and that, now is very much in question.
Yeah. And even Chase Owens on commentary, he was like, yeah, we had the agreement, but yeah, Finley's not there. It was not there. He's like, I don't care. I'm Team Bullet Club. Like, I don't care about, Civil War. Like, I'm with Dave Finley because he's Bullet Club, because I'm Bullet Club. And so, yeah, Chase is, like in every Civil War, Chase is kind of playing it down the middle, just kind of sticking.
That's not true.
Well, yeah, I know the first one he was kind of with the Elite because they jumped him out, but I mean, he went right back with them.
He was Team Elite until he wasn't elite enough to be with the Elite. Same thing with Yujiro.
But for the most part, Chase is just wanting a check. Like, he just wants that Bullet Club merch money. He's not trying to, stir the pot. He's like, if I gotta be with Finley, I'll be with Finley. I don't care.
Yeah, there's one point where they were talking to Chase. They said something about like. I don't know. He was supporting one of the team members to, maybe it was Kent or someone, to like go on a singles run. Like, what about you? He's like, you want me to work in a singles match? She's like, come on, bro. I'd much rather tag.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. So following that, we had Aaron Henare and Great Okan defeating Bushi and Shingo Takagi. Then we had Hiromu Sanada and Naito defeating Leo Rush, Tama Tonga, and Tomioka Hanma. And then we had Jeff Cobb, Kyle Fletcher, and Will Ospreay defeating Hiroki Goto, Yo, and Yoshihashi, which brought us to the two tournament matches on this evening. First, we had Mark Davis of Aussie Open defeating Toru Yano, 12 minutes and 33 seconds.
Yes, this went about 12 minutes, 33 seconds. Is that what you just said?
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm tired. 12 minutes for a Toru Yano comedy match in 2023, I think is probably too long. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Again, I will go on record. This match has a 4-star or 4 out of 10 rating on Cage Match, which basically equates to a 2 or maybe even lower than 2-star match.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think this was that bad. For what it actually was. I feel like, again, I think it really depends on what your tastes are as it pertains to Toru Yano comedy. But I mean, I think back to that All-Star Junior show that we just recently watched, and they had that like hentai match. That's something that was like 2 stars or below. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Comparatively, this was fine. Like, I mean, if Yano comedy isn't your shtick, I get it. I feel like he again is one of those guys similar in line to Yujiro that can eat a pinfall and be fine. Conversely, if you need to use him to set up an upset, he's the trickster god and he can get away with that. We all kind of know what his matches are going to be. This wasn't like the most. I've seen some really, really egregious Yano matches in my time. This was not one of them. It wasn't great either. I'm not going to like advocate for it and say you should go out of your way. I definitely think 12 minutes was way too prolonged and probably why there's so much blowback on this. But I got to tell you, Jeremy, I was just glad to see Mark Davis pick up the W because we thought he was going to be slotted in that Chucky T or British Bulldog sort of spot where he gets upset by Yano. And I'm glad that didn't happen here.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised that Mark Davis got the win here because, yeah, it seemed like, oh, there's no way they're going to do Mark Davis first of all, Ospreay in the next round. So it definitely seemed like, yeah, Yano was going to get the banana peel kind of win. And here, we got all the Yano gimmicks here. He tied Davis to he tied Fletcher to the guardrail who was on the outside. And then he was trying to tie Davis up. He was hiding under the ring. So,
they both went under the ring at one point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. And if you don't like that comedy, I mean, I'm not going to try and sell you on it. I get it, why people don't like it. I also sometimes find it to be a nice break from what's going on in the tournament. But, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like it's also a little bit of a rite of passage. Like for a guy like Mark Davis, who has really shown a lot in this tournament already, I feel like putting him in there with a vet like Yano and seeing what he can do with him is probably a little bit of a test to kind of test the waters to see where he might be for a potential singles run, the same way that they're doing with Kyle Fletcher. And so I don't think it's all bad the way that people, I understand that people just want to grade on the quality of a match and that's fine, but they act like it's so sports centric, and I get it. This is more sports centric than WWE, but we're not watching fucking Fighting Network rings.
Yeah.
This isn't Joint Promotions 1979 World of Sport Pro Wrestling that we're watching here. It is New Japan Pro Wrestling, and like they do have comedy and they do have shtick, and that's just part of it. I mean, I don't know. I felt like the outrage was so overpronounced. I was kind of, shocked by it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was kind of like, that 2.5-ish range for this matchup. I thought it was a good opportunity for Davis to kind of show some more personality than he normally gets to do with the straight-up Aussie Open tag matches. He got to kind of play into that Yano comedy match and kind of show his side of things there. And so overall, I mean, I thought it was fine. I think anything below 2.5, I think is kind of an egregious rating for it. But I could see people going a flat 3 stars if you like that kind of Yano comedy.
Yeah, I would just go flat 3 because I didn't think it was. The only thing I would say is that it was just too long. There might have been some dead spots in the middle. Maybe you could go sub 3, and I think that'd be fine. But like, there was a lot of outrage over this match, and I'm like, have you not watched Toru Yano before? Like, I don't get it.
Yeah. So Mark Davis, he picked up the kind of surprising win here, which means he would face Will Ospreay in his next tournament matchup. And then the main event for this evening, we had Evil defeating the Son of Strong Style, Ren Narita, 18 minutes and 44 seconds.
Yeah, this wasn't good. But it wasn't as bad as people are making. Again, this got a 4.28 on Cage Match, which I'm like, I don't know. That's a little over the top, but I do get it. There is a series. Here's the thing. We heard a lot of individuals on different spaces, people with voices in the community that were adamant that once we were out of the COVID restrictions and once we had cheering crowds and once we had vocalization from the audience, that this House of Torture thing was going to prove to be a hot ticket in terms of major heat, that it was going to be molten, that the crowds were going to be lively, that the hate was going to be visceral when it came to the House of Torture. And I got to tell you, I not only do I think that Evil was a failed experiment as a main event player in this company, but I think we have had enough time now with vocal crowds to definitively say that this idea of the House of Torture as a top heel act that draws heat is also a failed experiment as well. I know earlier in the show, I did make mention how this element has always kind of existed in New Japan. So you kind of do have to you have to give a little leeway to understand what you're watching because it's just part of it. But it is so excessive, the amount of cheating that goes on with this group, whether it's ref bumps, low blows, garrote wires, foreign objects, chairs on the outside, exposing the turnbuckle. I mean, and run-ins and, shots from a fucking, wrench. Like, it's just very excessive and very over the top, and it's unrelenting. It always is happening. That even when the matches aren't that bad, which I would say both of Evil's matches in this tournament that we've seen so far, I don't think they were that bad. They were probably close to like a 3-star effort. And I felt like the guys he was working with gave it their all and really leaned into the shtick, which some people like say Zack Sabre Jr. has kind of proved that the best way to have a good match with Evil, or like Yoshihashi is another one, is to just kind of lean in and play off of what they're doing to the biggest extent.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't matter how much people do that now. The audience, especially the North American audience watching at home, they are just fed up with it. They're tired of the bullshit. They don't want it anymore. And I don't think, and the silence from the crowds tells you that they're not angry about it. They're just completely, mostly indifferent to it whatsoever. The only time they get lively is when, like, at one point, Ren Narita kicked out of a major spot and it seemed like he was about to lose, and they really reacted for that. But the heat that House of Torture is generating is non-existent for the most part.
Yeah, it's more go away heat. I feel like, yes, people just don't want to see them win. It's not not in a good like money drawing way where you have a top heel and people are paying money to watch this top heel getting beat. It's not quite that. It's people being, I don't want to watch Evil. I don't really want to see him. So a lot of times when Evil is in control and the House of Torture shenanigans are happening, you're not getting a ton of crowd reactions. You're not getting a ton of boos or a ton of heat. There is this kind of that silence there, and you're waiting, hoping that the other person's just going to kind of come back or the match is going to end soon. I think that's what we got here in this matchup. There were parts of the match where, Evil was in full control of Ren Narita, and like you mentioned, the crowd was just kind of sitting there, just kind of silent until we got to those near fall spots where it seemed like Ren Narita was going to kind of out wrestle shenanigans and get the win.
So, how does it feel when you play Roll Up to Win with Tim Hortons? Buy a hot or cold beverage using the Tim's app and find out. Roll in the app for a chance to win prizes ranging from free coffee and donuts to a Universal Orlando resort vacation or a sweet car. Oh, don't forget the TV. And this year, every roll is a shot at a $1,000 daily giveaway drawing for 2 $500 prizes. Roll up to win and get treated by Tim's. No purchase necessary. Account registration required. 50 U.S. and D.C. 18 plus entered by 4/2/23. See rules at rolluptowin.com for free entry and full details. Void in Florida and where prohibited.
When it's time for an adventure on the open highway, one quick call to American Family Insurance gets you headed in the right direction. Our Travel Peace of Mind package is there if you encounter a bump in the road. From roadside assistance to rental car coverage, we have you covered. Find a local agent or get a quote at amfam.com.
American Family Insurance.
American Family Mutual Insurance Company, SI, and its operating company, 6000 American Parkway, Madison, Wisconsin.
At Kroger, shopping with pickup and delivery is the same as shopping in-store. Same low prices, deals, and rewards on the same high-quality items. It's one small click for groceries, one big win for busy families everywhere. Start your cart today at Kroger.com. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
And right now, stock up on your favorites during the 10 for 10 sale. Mix and match participating items and get 10 for just $10 with your card. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Yeah, and so I was mentioning these near falls towards the end here. There's a lot of cheating and shenanigans. So of course there's a ref bump towards the middle or towards the end of the match here, where then you get Dick Togo jumping in and all of House of Torture coming in and putting the boots to Narita. Evil using a chair, the baseball spot, and they do the magic killer. And then the ref comes back in, gets a 2 count, but then he kicks out, and the crowd popped then, like you mentioned, the crowd popped for the kick out for that near fall because they thought it was pretty much over there. Then he was able to get the rear naked choke on. Evil accidentally hit Dick Togo, and then Ren avoided everything as Evil. But then Evil eventually hit a low blow, mule kick, and then a clothesline for a near fall, and then hit the everything is Evil to get the win here.
Yeah, during that point where he gave him the low blow, if you notice, like Red Shoes was right there, and Evil had to push Red Shoes away so that he could, legally, quote unquote, hit the low blow outside of the referee's view. And New Japan's camera crew did a fantastic job here because they kept Red Shoes out of the frame. And I rewatched this like 3 times to figure out, I'm like, could he see what he did? And I feel like he had to have. Like, he was still because by the time they scanned back, and it was only a few seconds, he was right there in the vicinity, which like calls into question, like, I don't know, like just from a kayfabe perspective, why aren't you, either admonishing or even, reprimanding or even threatening to disqualify the guy that just literally put hands on you, pushed you, and then did a low blow, like very blatantly. Like, even if you didn't quite see it, it doesn't take much to figure out what happened. Like, the dude's on the ground, he's holding his balls, and and he was in a dominant, position before the dude who was about to get choked out pushed you. Like, I don't know, some of that's a little over the top for me, and that's on top of all the other cheating that was happening in this match. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely it's not a good look here, and kind of had the feeling Evil was going to get the win because the Strong Style, trio of Narita, Despy, and Suzuki have kind of had the best of House of Torture in their feud, in the Never Six-Man title feud, and so it was kind of finally time for House of Torture to get a win back to kind of keep the feud going, and so Evil being Narita, and then everything that's kind of happening on Evil's side of the bracket. Definitely, I understand why Evil won, but of course, I would have preferred Narita, and of course, I would have preferred a better match in general.
Right, and I mean, I'm right there with you. I would have preferred for Ren Narita to go through, and I think this speaks a little bit to what I said earlier in the fact that I think the company can sometimes be a little bit too slow burny when it comes to how they book some of these guys when they're returning from excursion or when they're like young stars. I mean, we saw what they did with Red Narita in that TV title tournament. The tournament seemed to be all centered around him, but he ultimately dropped the loss at Wrestle Kingdom to Zack Sabre Jr. Well, we talked about that at the time, and we said this gives him a new goal and a new purpose, but we haven't really seen much from that. And instead, he transitioned to a trios title run and chase with Desperado and Suzuki. And so now he's in a whole new tournament. He, drops a loss to Evil the first night. And I think that kind of speaks a little bit to where it's like, sometimes this company can't make up their mind as to whether or not they want to go with somebody. They didn't go with Ren Narita full bore in that first tournament. And, I don't know what's worse, whether he loses on the first night or if they had continued to push him and then he drops a return loss to, say, like Sonata later in the quadrant. It's hard to say. At the same time, though, I know that people are very upset about Evil. And I mean, I've got my own reputation when it comes to burying Evil 6 feet under. I've done it multiple times on this show since his turn and probably even before he left LIJ.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is some benefit in keeping him somewhat strong. And the reason I say that is because let's not forget, this is a guy that won the title at one point and was showcased as a top star, right?
Right.
I mean, I think Western fans are totally okay with someone being a top guy and then descending back down into the middle ranks like they were Chris Jericho in the mid 2000s or the Miz, current day.
Right.
But,
I mean, even like a Jinder Mahal. Yeah. I feel like Western fans, we've kind of been educated from the WWE style of booking. Like, yeah, it's totally normal for a undeserving mid-card guy to kind of rise up and then fall right back down to where they were.
But here's the thing with Evil. Like, if this bracket is mainly focused around this LIJ sort of narrative, which we've been speculating on as it pertains to Sonata, makes all the sense in the world why Evil would be the guy that goes through. That, as well as the fact that House of Torture has just been taking loss after loss after loss after loss. They got to get a win somewhere, I mean, it's not quite 50-50 booking, but like they can't just be 100% buried under the earth unless you just want the group to not exist anymore, which I'm sure a lot of people don't want them to. The other thing, though, is that keeping him as a potential threat is kind of a smart booking crux, because you have this guy that cheats everybody, and then when he loses, which he typically, from all patterns from the past few years, aside from that first New Japan Cup that he won, he's never really had another major win, if you really think about it. But he's always kind of in play in these tournaments, whether it comes, whether it's the G1 or the New Japan Cup. He's always someone that's alive down the stretch, and then right when people are starting to believe, oh my God, they're going to have House of Torture win, he loses, and it kind of makes the guy that beat him. It's kind of smart if you really think about it from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a way, I think, to use Evil in roles like that. We've seen that kind of happen. Even Kevin Kelly mentioned on commentary last year, about, he was saying if an Evil went to the finals and won, that people would cancel New Japan World, and kind of building that narrative there. So when he finally lost, it was it felt like a big moment. And I think, we agree that putting the double titles on Evil during the pandemic was a bad booking decision, but I think it also hurts the booking when you don't use him in some kind of way. Like, yes, he shouldn't have never been the double champion, but at the end of the day, you made him the double champion. You look at the history books, he will be a former IWGP heavyweight champion. So I think just to completely beat him over and over again is not necessarily the best thing, just because of him being a former champion. So I do think kind of having him in roles like this where he does advance a little bit, it's not always losing. It makes sense just from a previous booking standpoint. And it's something you're just going to have to do because he was a former champion.
Right. And here's the other thing too, is like, if you don't want to watch him, you don't have to. I mean, if I had the choice, I wouldn't, most likely.
Yeah. But
when the company's giving you blowaway matches in the tournament with guys like, Tamatonga and Will Ospreay and Bishamon and Aussie Open and, Shingo, and the list kind of goes on and on. There's a lot of great things in this tournament. The fact that there's one guy that's kind of a deterrent, I don't think that that's like time to raise the crisis alarm and be like, oh my God, this company. I mean, like, Zack Sabre Jr. is still alive in the tournament. Will Ospreay still alive in the tournament. Kent has, been doing, well, actually he's dead, but, there's a lot of good things that are happening in the tournament. It's like people are ready to decry the company over one guy that we all kind of already know is a sticky mess.
Yeah. I think what's kind of happening here with some of these matches and the tournament overall is kind of something that our friend Rich Craich has been pointing out about AEW Dynamite on the flagship. He talks about when people watch Dynamite, like most of the discourse afterwards is whatever, like the one bad or negative thing that happened on the show. Meanwhile, like the rest of the show, you had all these great, notebook matches, all these great promos, these great angles. But then most of the discourse afterwards is that one bad thing, that one Brandy promo or whatever it is that people are talking about that, that was a really bad segment. But it's like, yeah, well, there's also like another hour and a half where we had, Kenny versus whoever, or this great trios match, and people don't really focus in on that. I think that's what's happening here with this tournament. It's like, yeah, we've been having some really great matches with like Shingo and Hanare and Ospreay and Davis and Fletcher and Goto. There's been some really, really good hard-hitting matches here, but people have been zeroing in on the Yano and Davis, the Evil and Narita, the 30-minute Sonata and Kenta match that we'll get to here in a minute. People are kind of zoned in on the negative, and I think that's kind of drowning out any of the positive that's been actually happening in this tournament.
Yeah, and I think that some of the criticisms are going to be, well, I think they're all truthful. I just think they're overblown. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's, I think there's a tendency to, I don't like this, so I'm going to over exaggerate about how bad it is. I also have to wonder, hypothetically, I know that there's a lot of other like pro resu companies and stuff, but I have to wonder, especially for like the Western audience, if the influence from AEW also kind of affects this. Like you sort of brought them up there, and I'm thinking to myself, it's like, how many weeks do we watch, say, like Dynamite? And I know they've had a few bad episodes here and there the last couple months, but by and large, they have these classic top to bottom, nothing, shows that are just filled with bangers.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then New Japan does that from time to time, but we also sort of have these other kind of longer running narratives throughout a tour, because it's not a weekly episodic show. It's a tour based show. And people, I think, will watch AEW, what they do on a Wednesday night, and they're like, damn, they're having like 4 or 5 great matches, and then you tune into a show like this, and it's like they got a strong undercard, and then on this particular night, 2 admittedly bad main event and semi-main event, and then it's like you kind of get dissatisfied, especially maybe if like you're a newer viewer, or even like a long-term viewer who's like over these kind of Gato booking tendencies.
Yeah.
But my only big thing with it is the tendency of the fan base to pretend as though this didn't always exist. Like it's something new, like it wasn't around for the past decade.
Right, yeah.
When both of these things, the comedy and, the bad, garbage, overbooked Russo style booking, that has always existed in New Japan. And then, Naito, going out there and having terrible matches in the main event. Let's not pretend like that hasn't been happening for the last 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, Gato loves
for every Naito Ospreay match, there's a Naito Suzuki.
Oh man, that IC title feud. Oh man. Yeah, but Gato loves Western booking. So the fact that you have a bunch of stables, you have a top cheating faction, or a lot of cheating and run-ins. You hear all those rumors during the pandemic of Gato and Dick Togo just talking about, we need to get heat, brother. Let's get more heat. And that's what Gato likes, that kind of Western Memphis get heat kind of thing. And sometimes it works out, but sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, but I guess we should probably move on. I don't have any further thoughts. I unfortunately, Ren Narita took the loss here, but I think we sort of were reading the tea leaves as early as during the preview for this tournament, kind of seeing like, yeah, they've been sort of booking Evil pretty weak the past 6 months. It's probably time for them to heat them up just a tad bit.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Yeah. We did have a question here from ethnic_dystopian. It says, if Young Boy got his wish and Bullet Club dissolved today, what faction would be in its place and who would be in it?
Oh man, that's too there's a million members of Bullet Club, so I don't fucking know. I do appreciate the question, but yeah, these anytime it's like a fantasy booking scenario sort of thing, I mean, I don't know, to be quite frank with you, where all the members of Bullet Club end up going and what group would rise up in its place. That's a little too involved for my taste.
Yeah, I'm not sure where the guys would land, but as far as like maybe just a existing faction that could take their place, I think we see the United Empire kind of in that role of where I know they're more kind of tweeners right now, but we've been talking about like the original Bullet Club and what made that group so popular and so cool was all these guys that were like real life friends, actually traveled together. There was that bond, that chemistry, that relationship that just kind of poured on screen, and you just saw what a tight-knit group that was. And I think we're seeing that here with United Empire. I mean, these guys are all friends. I mean, Ospreay and Aussie Open lived together. All these guys have like a history and a camaraderie together. It really seems like they are this really tight-knit kind of group. It seems like they're the rising kind of cool, mainly foreigners. Great Okan is the only domestic talent in the group, kind of fitting that Yujiro role back in the original run of Bullet Club. And so I think there's a lot of things that United Empire is doing that kind of reminds me of that initial kind of Bullet Club run. And it can really, I mean, if you got rid of Bullet Club, you can push United Empire as that really kind of top heel tweener foreigner faction.
I guess so, but there are certain idioms and things that are so specifically associated with the Bullet Club that there would be a missing element from the mythos and the lore of New Japan. I would be reticent if hypothetically, let's say they turn another group into that. You know what I mean? Like, I would hate to see United Empire become Bullet Club and adopt some of the negative, tendencies that we associate with the group, or even another group kind of gathering those things. So I don't know. Yeah.
Well, let's move on to night 4 here. So on undercard, we had Sho and Yujiro defeating Kosei Vegeta and Zack Sabre Jr., Taichi and Kanemaru defeating Dick Togo and Evil, Chase, Finley, ELP, and Kenta defeating Despy, Suzuki, Narita, and Taguchi. Then we had Great Okan, Jeff Cobb, Mark Davis, and Will Ospreay defeating Goto, Ishii, Yano, and Hanma. Then we had Leo Rush, Yo, Shota Umino, and Tama Tonga defeating Bushi, Hiromu Sanada, and Tetsuya Naito, which brings us to the semi-main and main, which were tournament matches. We had Kyle Fletcher defeating Yoshihashi, 20 minutes and 6 seconds.
Yeah, this night showcased, as it's almost the other side of the coin from the previous night that we discussed, and it showcased how great the New Japan Cup can be, especially with some of these matchups that we're not used to getting. Like, for instance, this one in particular, Kyle Fletcher and Yoshihashi. I mean, there were many years where Yoshihashi wasn't necessarily even involved with, like, say, the G1, or if he was involved in it, he was kind of like the perennial loser. And there were several years where people were talking about him being on the bubble as it pertained to those big match performances. And then you look at a guy like Kyle Fletcher, who, like, let's say if he wasn't in this tournament, right, and they were still just, having him and Mark Davis tag team around and do the odd show here or there, the odd tour here or there, we wouldn't get this kind of high stakes scenario to see what he's capable of doing against a Yoshihashi. And we definitely wouldn't see him in, like, let's say a G1 Climax, because of the fact that he's a tag team specialist, and very rarely will get to showcase what goods he has when it comes to this style of wrestling. And that's the beauty of New Japan Cup, is to give certain guys that maybe aren't a good fit right now for the G1 or for like a major title an opportunity to showcase what they have. And that's exactly what Kyle Fletcher and Yoshihashi went out there and they did. And this match was just fantastic. High speed, high athleticism, big moves, big strikes, high risk. Yoshihashi and Kyle Fletcher, they went out there and they laid it all on the line. And we kind of know this about Yoshihashi. If you've been paying attention, I know that his demeanor, his looks, and his charisma might sometimes be lacking, but there's just certain matches. I remember the match from G1 this past year, I believe it was with ELP, like, kind of reminded me of this a little bit, where it's like when Yoshihashi is called upon to go out there and have a really high level, kind of quasi spot fest sort of match with someone that's capable of doing it, like a Kyle Fletcher or, like a Will Ospreay, Yoshihashi can hang with the best of them. He's almost like we've kind of joked in the past about, like, I remember when he wrestled, oh God, what's his name? Who's the dude that stole the protein?
Oh, Elgin.
He had those matches with Elgin where we're like, these are like video game matches. How many like big moves and big strikes these guys were spamming, and like it's kind of outrageous. That's the kind of match I had with Kyle Fletcher. I loved it. I'd probably go, I don't know, 3 3/4, maybe even close to 4 stars. Like, this was just an excellent match.
Yeah, I'm definitely 4 stars on this match. This was a, like you mentioned, very hard-hitting, very fast-paced matchup. Yoshihashi has really just continued to just be on fire, ever since the pandemic, and that, great, never 6-man title run that he had with Goto and Ishii, and then transferring all that into the Bishamon run and the great matches that him and Goto have been having. Well, all of that has really just kind of built up Yoshihashi, giving him this new confidence, this new edge in his matches. And yeah, it's really kind of killed it here with Kyle Fletcher. And like you mentioned, New Japan Cup, a great opportunity for a guy like Kyle Fletcher, who we've seen in singles, opportunities in the past, especially when Mark Davis was injured during the pandemic. We saw that great empty arena match with Kyle Fletcher and Will Ospreay at Rev Pro, and some other really great, singles matches he had kind of during that pandemic time when Davis was injured. And we know that Tanahashi loves Kyle Fletcher, so it definitely seems like New Japan is interested in seeing kind of what a Kyle Fletcher singles run could potentially look like. And I thought he did an absolutely great job here. There are some guys who are just tag wrestlers and don't always really adjust to singles, or their singles matches are not as good as their tag matches. But I thought Kyle really, took advantage of the opportunity here. It looked like he belonged in a singles match. He wasn't gassed out, or there wasn't kind of any awkward moments in the matchup. And so, yeah, I thought he killed it. Towards the end here, things really picked up after Yoshihashi hit a Canadian Destroyer for a near fall, which led to a double down. Then they were trading, big forearms back and forth on their knees and just kind of giving each other these brutal, stiff strikes. Fletcher got hit with a super kick. Yoshihashi then hit a second rope Canadian Destroyer in a big clothesline for a near fall. Fletcher comes back with a half Nelson suplex. And so they're just kind of going back and forth. Yoshihashi hit a brain buster for another really great near fall. But then eventually Fletcher would come back and hit that jumping tombstone, which I believe he calls the Aussie Arrow, to get the win here.
Yeah, and it's kind of similar with the Mark Davis match that we're going to review. I wasn't quite sure what their singles finishers were. I'm not necessarily like the most knowledgeable fan when it comes to, like, say, Rev Pro and some of the companies that they're used, that they frequent, that others might be more familiar with. But yeah, when he hit that turning tombstone, that was pretty awesome. Very, like, reminded me a lot of like the one, or I was gonna say 1, 2, 3, the Dynamite Kid sort of influence. And yeah, it caught me off guard, but it was a great finish to a great match, and it continues to play into the mounting rivalry between Bishamon and the United Empire / Aussie Open. So Kyle Fletcher picks up the win here, moves on to the next round where he will face Hiroki Goto, the tag team partner of Yoshihashi, another half of the IWGP Heavyweight Tag Team Champions. And, there's also kind of a narrative here that Kyle Fletcher had a 20-minute war with Yoshihashi, and he goes into the second round against Goto, who was fresh-faced and hasn't, had to fight anybody prior to their match.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Goto, one of the guys getting a first-round bye in the tournament. So, yeah, definitely a great story element there that we'll talk about in that matchup. And then the main event here was Aaron Henare getting kind of the first big upset in this tournament. He defeats Shingo Takagi 20 minutes and 46 seconds.
And I might like this match even better than Kyle Fletcher and Yoshihashi. I think it's safe to say this was very likely the best match of Aaron Henare's entire career, or at least singles match of his entire career. And I'm really loving how Mark Davis and Will Ospreay came down to ringside to support both of their faction members. It is something that we've discussed where there are all these factions here in New Japan, but they don't always seem to be cohesive or actually, like let's say in the case of Chaos, they don't even really hardly exist anyways. But there's this camaraderie and sort of brotherhood with the United Empire. And I think that that's something that really served, like, say, the Bullet Club in some of their early iterations to kind of showcase and highlight those, bonds that the members have. And I think that goes a long way with the audience. I mean, AEW was literally built in many ways off of the supposed bonds or even real life realized bonds between the members of the elite. So I think that that's something smart that they're doing there. And Mark Davis and Will Ospreay were here for Aaron Henari's match with Shingo. But boy, this was really, really, really hard hitting. And I don't know if there's a better person in New Japan than Shingo to pair up with someone like Aaron Henare to not only have this style of match, but also to give Aaron Henare the space to showcase what he's capable of doing with this new offense that he's been building over the past couple of years.
Yeah, and also, to your point about United Empire kind of supporting each other, you had Jeff Cobb on commentary this night on the English side.
Yeah.
Great O'Connell was on the Japanese commentary. So you really just kind of are full support from these guys out here on ringside. But yeah, the hard-hitting nature, Shingo was a perfect guy to face off here against Henare. Back when Henare was a young lion, or kind of right when he graduated, he had that series of matches or feuds with Ishii, and there were some real kind of spotlights for him. And so we know that he can wrestle that kind of never hard-hitting style. And so, yeah, like you mentioned, Shingo, a perfect guy for Henare to kind of emphasize Hanare's strength. Like you mentioned, he's been doing a lot of that Muay Thai training, and he's been implementing a lot of those kickboxing strikes as well. And so I thought Shingo did an excellent job of putting over Henare's striking here in this match. Shingo is kind of known as one of the better, hard hitters in New Japan today. But, when Henare was hitting those body blows or some of those spinning kicks, he was really selling the power and the precision of Henare.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I feel like when it comes to Henare in big matches, we saw him in the G1 this past year, and he had a lot of really good, successful outings. But very rarely did he ever feel like someone that was putting all the pieces together in a manner to where you could see him having big New Japan style main event type matches. And that's exactly what this was on this night. And Shingo was the perfect guy to pair him with to do that. And they went out there and they laid it all on the line. And it was very emotional, very hard hitting. And, we kind of were calling for the upset before this match happened, but to see it play out the way it did, it was beautifully booked, because they could have very easily done some variation of the better guy slips on a banana peel and gives a contentious victory to the guy that upsets him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there even was a little bit, I don't want to say it was quite that same thing, but when Henare beat Tanahashi in the G1 on the first night this past year, it didn't feel conclusive. It definitely was shocking, but it sort of felt like a little bit like that, a little bit like, oh man, the vet slipped on a banana peel. But on this night, there was nothing like that. As good as the match as a whole was, the finishing sequence was so high level and so back and forth with so many reversals and hard strikes, and both guys coming very near to hitting their finishers until finally, out of nowhere, Henare was able to hit the Streets of Rage on him, and you're like, holy fuck. And then 1, 2, 3, he beats him, and it's like, okay, I understand why they did this. It is to give Henare a big push. It's to give him a meaningful win over a current champion so that he can become the next challenger and all that. But I believe he can beat Shingo because he just did it conclusively, kind of the same way how Tama Tonga beat Jay White. It felt kind of similar to that. Or Actually, it sort of reminded me when Tama Tonga beat Okada in the G1 the first time.
Yeah. And also, too, I think something that also helped this win is some of the work they did on the undercard. You did have Hanare pinning Shingo in one of the multi-man tag matches earlier in the week. And then plus, anytime they kind of faced off in multi-man, Hanare kind of had the advantage over Shingo. And so he was riding a ton of momentum going into the match. So it seemed like it was very believable, like you mentioned, with Hanare kind of controlling Shingo in those matches. And then coming in here, and once again, Shingo kind of selling his striking power. It totally was, a straight up believable win. Like, wow, Hanare was the better man this night. There was no, banana peel. Like, these guys are throwing bombs, throwing headbutts. Hanare with that big hammerhead headbutt towards the end there. Then, like you mentioned, hitting that Streets of Rage towards the end there, just pinning him right in the middle, 1, 2, 3. Definitely a big moment for Aaron Hanare.
He also kicked out of the Made in Japan, which, granted, that's not Shingo's number one finisher anymore, but for a guy the level of booking that Hanare has been the past few years, it was believable he could have beaten him with a made in Japan. So when he kicked out, I was like, holy shit. It was pretty awesome. And that whole thing where Hanare beat him in the multi-man on the first night, to me seemed like or whenever it was, seemed like a red herring. Like, okay, he beat him clean in the multi-man tag, so now Shingo's for sure beating him. We were wrong. But it turns out we weren't wrong.
Yeah.
Hanare did beat him, and, Hanare moved on in the tournament. It's pretty shocking. And this match was fantastic. One of the best of the tournament. Yeah,
definitely somewhere in that 4 4.25 range on this match.
I'm 4 1/4 on this one.
Yeah, it's definitely in that range there. And one of the best matches of the tournament thus far. And a great night for the United Empire, having Fletcher advance, having Hanare advance, and had a big, celebration at the end of the night there with Cobb and Okan coming off commentary to celebrate with these guys.
Yeah, and Kevin Kelly mentioned at the end of the night, he's like, every member of United Empire that's in this tournament are still alive. So it was like, damn, like, they're dominating.
Yeah. So then that brings us to night 5, where we had Hanare, Okan, and Cobb defeating Oscar Lube, Tama Tonga, and Toriano. Finley and ELP defeating Kosei Vegeta and Zack Sabre Jr. Dick Togo, Evil Show, and Yujiro defeating Just 4 Guys. Leo Rush, Ishii, and Yo defeating Bushi, Hiromu, and Shingo. Then we had Kyle Fletcher, Mark Davis, and Will Ospreay defeating Bishamon and Hanma. And then the 3 big matches on this night. First, we had Tanahashi and Okada, the Mega Aces. They defeated Ren Narita and Shota Umino 13 minutes and 32 seconds.
Yes, I think this was probably the match of the night, this tag match. And it was relatively short, but it was very, very good for what it was. High octane, very good pace, and kind of like this sort of, you just really do get the feeling that, everything put aside, that Umino and Narita are the future of New Japan, and then you've got the current, New Japan and Okada and Tanahashi, and it feels like very much a generational match that, one day we might be looking back being like, damn, they did Tanahashi and Okada versus Narita and Umino before they were like truly big stars. And that's kind of the vibe I got here. And it was definitely a case of Red Narita and Umino looking to prove a point against these veterans.
Yeah, they kind of jumped at the bell and were brawling with Okada and Tanahashi, and Umino and Narita coming from the same dojo class. These guys have teamed and faced each other several times when they were young lions, so they had great chemistry here. And they were really taking it to Tanahashi and Okada in the beginning of the match, really cutting off the ring and knocking Tanahashi off the apron several times, and really going toe to toe with these guys until we kind of got to the end. We got a similar kind of layout to the Kiyomiya match here, where Kiyomiya, he got his big offense in, but at the end of the day, Okada flip the switch and put an end to him. We got the same thing here towards the end. Umino and Narita here, they were throwing out a lot of their big moves and were in control for a while. But then, Okada, once again, he hit that switch when he was in there with friend Narita, and he just killed him with a Rainmaker. And then that led Okada and Tanahashi to do a double team on Umino, that elbow drop, high fly flow combo. And then Okada hit a second Rainmaker on Narita to get the win.
Yeah, which, by the way, I don't know why we didn't mention it last week, but I love the idea of both of those guys coming off the top rope, hitting their trademark stuff on somebody. Like, to me, that's a finish.
Yeah. They could have, if Tanahashi was a legal man, that would have been a great way to end the match.
Yeah.
So it was a fun tag match. And I think it's going to be, like you said, one of those, maybe not hidden gem, but kind of special matches where it's like maybe 10 years from now, you're like, oh man, I can't believe they actually like ran this on this like undercard of a New Japan Cup.
Yeah.
So then after that, we had second round matchup in New Japan Cup. We had Tetsuya Naito defeating the crown jewel Chase Owens, 18 minutes and 7 seconds.
Yeah. Again, this is looking at the scores here. This was a night where the top two matches got pretty abysmal cage match ratings. I think Naito and Chase Owens sitting at 5.81, Sonata and Kenta sitting at 4.61. And I thought Naito and Chase Owens was pretty good for what it was, honestly. I didn't think it was like blow away. I definitely think from what we've seen so far, and there's no reason for me to, at this point, there's never been any reason for me to think otherwise. I do think that there's a ceiling on the level of match that Chase Owens is capable of delivering. Like, he's an incredible hand. He's incredibly smooth, very smart worker, so competent in many, many different ways. But when it comes to hitting that next gear of emotion and getting people invested into the story, there seems to be some sort of disconnect. But with that being said, even though I definitely think that Naito seemed to be, pretty much, resigned to having essentially like a Road to level undercard style match, the last 5 or 6 minutes of this match are fantastic. And the big moment being where these guys are fighting on the ropes in the corner and Chase Owens hits a fucking second rope styles clash for near fall 17 minutes into the match. Like, that got me off of my chair. And then hitting the C trigger and, really all throughout the match teasing the package pile driver, which we know, it's sort of like Fale's bad luck fall or
grenade,
or even oh God, what's wrong with me? Why am I forgetting the wrestlers' names tonight? Makabe has the King Kong knee drop. And those moves, it doesn't matter that those guys aren't slotted at the top. They have this one ace in the hole. If they hit it, you're done. And that's kind of what the package pile driver is. If Chase Owens hits you with that, it's night-night. Doesn't matter if you're Kazuchika Okada or not. And they teased that quite a bit, and he was never able to catch it. But had he been able to, he might have been able to put Naito away. And I also liked that Naito hit him with the running Destino, and he kicked out of it, kind of creating the illusion. I mean, there are definitely guys that he could have hit that on, or even just Chase Owens in general, under different circumstances, not in a high-profile tournament match. If he hit a running Destino, he could have still easily pinned someone the caliber of Chase Owens. But on this night, Chase Owens had to dig a little bit deeper, kick out of that. And I like that aspect of the story. So, yeah, I'm not sure about these scores. I think they're a little overblown. But, the match was a little bit long in the tooth. But I thought it was pretty good for what it was.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fine match. I think probably most people's issues are, it's Chase Owens, a guy who's typically kind of booked as a low kind of mid-card guy in there with a Tetsuya Naito. And yes, we've seen Chase beat guys like Tanahashi with the package pile driver, but it's not a very common thing. And so this was a very competitive back and forth match with a top star main eventer and a lower mid card Bull Club guy. I'm sure that's kind of probably most people's issues, but if you kind of throw it out the window, it was kind of a very good back and forth matchup here, especially the closing stretch that you mentioned, which we saw Chase hitting that top rope, that second rope Styles clash for a great near fall. And then Naito ends up pulling up the win with a victory roll. So then he didn't even hit the Destino to beat him. So Naito did a really good job of making it super competitive and kind of making it look like he just kind of squeaked by Chase.
Right. And this was this Naito's second match at the tournament or first match? I can't recall.
This was his second match. He beat ELP in the first round.
Right, and he beat him with the same roll-up, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I figured that's what it was, but I didn't want to misspeak and talk about how he's been beating people with the roll-up and he only had one match and I sound like an idiot. But yeah, so I mean, there's a narrative at play that he's defeating people in this tournament with this roll-up, and it's the same one that he used last year in the tournament when he was facing different people. Most notably, he beat Okada with that move. So it's definitely sort of a running theme throughout it. But, my whole thing is like, I get it. I understand if people are, I just think that people complain to complain. I'm like, I get it. Chase Owens, he's a low level guy. People don't like him, but it's like, we're going to watch Naito and Okada or Naito and Tanahashi for the millionth time. Like I welcome the fresh matchups personally.
Yeah. So then,
plus we're smart fans. We know what the fucking New Japan Cup is. You know what I mean? Like, it's not the G1.
Yeah. So then main event was Sonata defeating Kenta, 29 minutes and 12 seconds.
All right. Now, this is a match that I think was actually bad. Okay, actually, let me take that back. For these two guys going out there and having a competent wrestling match, they're definitely capable of it, and they definitely did that. It's just there's so much gaga in between the actual wrestling that I don't need at any point to see Sonata and Kenta in 2023 go out there and push up against the G1 Climax time limit. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah. This match was way too long. There's a lot of stuff kind of happening here that made this match not great. And again, it's kind of what we've been talking about with these Kenta matches, where parts of the match you get that 02, 03 Noah Kenta where he's doing all these hard slaps and crazy combos, and then you get the 2023 Kenta where it's the cheating, the ref bumps, the speed walking, like you get all that mixed in. Then you have a guy like Sonata who, he just came off a great performance with Taichi. But I think this match proved the point of what we've been saying about Sonata from day one of this show, is that he wrestles to the level of the guy that he's in there with. So he was in there with Taichi, and he had this hard-hitting banger because Taichi kind of made him. And here...
It was literally the story. The story was his heart's not in it, and Taichi pushed him to the point where his heart had to be exposed. You know what I mean?
Right. And then here, he's kind of wrestled down to what Kenta was doing, and you did not have that same fiery Sonata that you got in the previous match. This was the same Sonata who's, doing the plancha to the outside, trying to do all his wacky roll-ups, trying to use a skull end. There was a lot of kind of the same stuff. There wasn't that fire. There wasn't that hard hitting that like you saw in the Taichi match.
Yeah, I'm not sold on Sonata as a top guy, and I know definitely there could be a disconnect here between what a Western audience loves and appreciates, and is gonna be receptive to, and then versus a domestic audience. So I admit we could be completely in the wrong here. And maybe many of the things that Sonata does do resound with the domestic audience, but it doesn't sound like it when I'm watching it live, and it doesn't feel like it. And it is so strange for a guy that's been in the game as long as Sonata has, and that is as talented from a physical standpoint as he is, that he just doesn't seem at different points to be able to put it all together the way that you would imagine he could, unless he is wrestling someone that is superior in terms of match layout. I'm wondering, like, if it's I don't know if it's laziness or if it is, if he's just kind of, accepting of his lot in life, or maybe he doesn't have that technical mind to know how to go out there and put together, he knows how to do the mechanics of a wrestling match, but maybe he doesn't know how to lay it out to get over. I don't really know what it is, but there is a disconnect, in my opinion, from this guy and him sort of being a quasi charisma black hole. I don't think he has the tools to transcend to the next level to be a main eventer. And this was something we were saying in 2018, and we got flack and we got buried. And there were people that were commenting and responding to us saying, that it's ridiculous that we were, saying that he wasn't at the level of a Kenny Omega or a Kota Ibushi or some of the other guys that are, his contemporaries. But, we're 5 years on, and look at where he's at, and we're questioning as to whether, or at least I'm questioning, like, why are we investing in Sonata in 2023? Why are we giving him the shine and the spotlight? I don't have faith, like, me personally, I don't have faith in him to be a guy to carry a group or to go out there and consistently have great matches. Like, I just don't understand it. I'm kind of at a loss here.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, and I think it kind of goes back to the point you were making earlier about New Japan being conservative about some of the younger guys. Like, we've kind of been here, done that with Sonata. He's had the New Japan Cup run. He's had the feud with Okada, that 4 series of matches they had in 2018 or 2019, whatever it was. And, like, I know people love that series and thought it was one of the best matches of the year, one of those matches, but now it's 2023. We have a whole crop of young guys that need the chance, that need the opportunity, and we're kind of going back to the well here with Sonata and trying to get him over and tell the story. And it's like, I don't get it. Like, at this point, I don't see him as a viable main eventer, so why are we spending the time investing in him? Take a look at it. I mean, they went with Evil over him.
I think that was the right call if you really think about it, though.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, I think that's kind of where, like, he is. Like, they chose Evil over him, and now we're back here trying to invest in him and get him going and get him to that next level where it's very clear, like you mentioned, there's something, and I know New Japan matches are not heavily agented, so I don't know if it's a thing where, like, he needs an agent that's kind of helping him lay out more stuff, or I don't know what it is, but there's something where he's going out there and the matches are not clicking unless he's in there with Ospreay or Sabre or Taichi or Tanahashi or somebody like that.
There's no denying that Sonata's supremely talented, but almost everybody that's working in New Japan Pro Wrestling is supremely talented. And there are levels to the game, and he's not on the level, unfortunately, of the top echelon of workers. And there is a house style that requires that level of innovation and care and excitement, and it just isn't there with I was gonna say Jay White, with Sonata. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it is mind-boggling that we're doing this LIJ story. And from a narrative standpoint, it makes sense. I mean, I am interested to see where it's going, but if they had to do this match, I don't know why it couldn't have gone the way several other matches in the tournament went, where it's sub 20 minutes or Reddit. I mean, bro, we went almost 30. This is one of the longest matches in the tournament. And that's another thing Sonata is very much known for, is having long, arduous matches. And it's like, why? There's no reason. There's no reason for me to sit through a 30-minute Sonata match. Now, I will say this. It's probably the only positive thing I will say. 4.61, that's probably too high. Or I'm sorry, too low. To me, this was probably a solid 3-star match. But do you really want to be watching Sonata and Kenta for 29 minutes have a 3-star classic?
No.
No. It was just too slow, too methodical, and just lacking in any real fire or heat or passion. Like, I don't know. And Sonata's, I don't know. The other thing too is like, you kind of compare this run, right, where the tournament's about Sonata, and let's compare and contrast that to Evil when Evil was turning heel. Like, sure, Evil's matches weren't great, but like, you're like, damn, he's going out there and doing something different every night. He's brutalizing people, he's cheating, something's happening. And David Finley's kind of captured a little bit of that same, say, on the other side of the bracket. You got Dave Finley, and I know he's only had the one match, and we're going to see another one here soon, but it's like, okay, there's something going on with him. But like with Sonata, it's like, all right, he's just a loser who happens to be winning. Nothing has changed.
Yeah, like at all. After the Tai Chi match, it seemed like, okay, maybe something is happening, and maybe there's more to this story. But then you had the multi-mans, and like it was kind of a regular old LIJ multi-mans. There was no real tension between him and Naito or LIJ. And then you get to this match, it was like, it's kind of same old Sonata. Like, based off this match, you wouldn't know that they were telling a story here.
Yeah, all it tells me is that I believe a lot more in Tai Chi than I do in Sonata at this point.
Yeah. And, this match had a lot of shenanigans. Sonata, or Kenta, taping up Sonata in the Paradise Lock. There's several ref bumps towards the end here. Kenta pushed Sonata into the ref. He hit a low blow, and then he got the strong title, and he was going to hit Sonata with it, and Sonata kicked it in his face, and then he hit that Blade Runner DDT thing and got the win. And then we had some questions here. First from the Dark Soldier. It says, you guys laughed at me, ignored me, told me that Sonata wouldn't make it far, and now he's in the quarterfinal. Who's laughing now?
Did we say that? I don't think we said that. Did we say that?
I think we kind of just dismissed Sonata. At least we didn't want to see Sonata make it far.
Did we not like speculate that he could easily be in the finals? Just based on the story that they were telling with him? I don't know.
Maybe, but I know I remember I was not super high on him, and I did not want to see him go far in the tournament.
I don't recall. I honestly don't recall. I feel like I was booking out either him or ELP to be in the top final four for that quadrant. So I don't know. But I will say this. Nothing about what they're doing with Sonata is inspiring any confidence in me that they're making the right decision regardless.
Right, yeah.
Like I wouldn't be taking a victory lap if this is the output that the guy is showing us.
Yeah. Death Triangle 720, do you think the Sonata push needs to progress or stop?
That's the tough thing is from all reports, I mean, it's not normal that the idea that New Japan would take a look at what they're doing and say, it's not really going so well, so let's just put a stop to it. That's pretty rare that they ever do anything like that. They're usually going to, especially with Gedo, especially when it's a major story, they're going to kind of stick with it and see it through to the end for better or for worse. So regardless of whether I think they shouldn't or should be doing it or should continue it is kind of irrelevant at this point because they're going to give it at least a chance,
Yeah, so they'll probably keep going with it. I mean, again, I think we've kind of made our opinions known that if we had the book, we would not be pushing Sonata right now, but they're kind of already going that way. And I think we got to see, the old let it play out and see where it ends up going.
That's the real question. I'm not offended that Sonata's winning matches, after going through a long, pronounced dry spell where he's on the losing end. That was interesting. it's very interesting that he's taking losses. Now he's in this tournament and he's getting victories. And with this victory, it sets him up to be on a collision course with Tetsuya Naito. And these guys have been having, especially after this night, during the undercard, started having a lot more tension with one another. We've seen this before. I mean, this is not anything new. Maybe to new viewers it would be, but we've seen when these two guys compete against one another in the G1, and when they're teaming together, there's all sorts of dissension leading up to their interpromotion or interfactional matches. So we've seen the song and dance, but it is going to be interesting if there is any sort of deviation or pivot as it pertains to Sonata remaining a viable member of LIJ. What happens if he beats Naito? So as much as we're complaining about the quality of this match, the forthcoming match with him and Naito, and if he gets past Naito, probably Evil, those become very, very interesting scenarios.
Right. That then the story picks up there. And I think people are really excited to kind of see what's going to happen with Naito and Sonata. That's going to be a match in Cork and Hall this week, so I think it should be a sold out hot crowd for that match, and hopefully that really kind of kicks up whatever the story is here.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm at this point, Jeremy, where it's like, it's not 2016 anymore. It's not 2017. We're not at the point where when the company is doing something iffy, we say, hey, Gato's earned our trust, without question. Give him the time and space. Let's see what he's got cooking.
Yeah.
In 2023, I don't think that way about his booking anymore. Now I look at it with a side eye and I'm like, I guess we'll see. Because there's been some misses, and I just don't have faith in Sonata. Even as interesting as some of that sounds, I'm like, do I think that they're going to pull the trigger and tell a long-term story that's going to be satisfying and fulfilling with this guy? And I just don't see it. So I'll let him do it. I'm going to keep, we're not going to cancel the podcast over it or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I'm also kind of like, I don't know, bro. Sonata is a top guy. Like, what the fuck are we doing? Why? Why? I don't get it.
Question here from OK890. Has Taichi already played his part in the Sonata storyline, or will we see him encourage Sonata again?
That's been the only thing that I've truly found interesting and entertaining about this whole entire story is when the match they had and the fallout from it, where he seemed to be able to encourage and inspire Sonata to look into himself and find the courage to be his own man,
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they'll continue with it, but I'd like for them to bring Sonata into just four guys and then they jump him out real quick. Like that time when Jim the Anvil Neidhart thought he was joining DX.
Yeah.
And they jumped his ass out. I hope they do that to Sonata.
Yeah, I think the Naito match, I think, should answer some questions on kind of what's happening next. And maybe it's a thing where he beats Naito, then he's like, I no longer want to be under Naito, and that leads to him teaming with just four guys or doing something with Taichi maybe. So I guess we'll see. I'll have to wait and see what happens.
Well, it's a big match, and I guess we'll talk about it here in a little bit. But yeah.
So then moving on to night 6, we had Narita and Oiwa defeating Oscar Lube and Hanma. Umino and Nakashima defeating Vegeta and Sabre. Owens, Finley, ELP, and Kenta defeating just four guys. Great Okan, Jeff Cobb, Mark Davis, and Will Ospreay defeating House of Torture. Bushi, Hiromu Sanada, Shingo, and Naito defeating Leo Rush, Ishii, Yano, Yo, and Yoshihashi. And then our tournament matches, second round action, we had the never openweight champion Tama Tonga defeating Aaron Hanare 16 minutes and 34 seconds.
Yeah, we had Jeff Cobb on commentary this night as well, I believe. And he did another great job. And I really enjoyed having him there to call Aaron Hanare's match against Tama Tonga. Tama's a guy who, he's been on the tour. He's been having undercard matches, and they've mostly been pertaining to the preview for his tournament matches, but I haven't gotten a strong feel for any, a direct potential challenger for the Never title right now. So I find that kind of interesting. But they talked about how if Hanare had beaten him here, he might potentially have a claim for a Never title shot. Obviously, that didn't happen. But I thought this match was very good, very strong. Not in the same league as Hanare and Shingo was from a few nights prior, but Hanare had a very short turnaround before his second round cup match against a fresh Tama Tonga. And the match was very, very good. What I loved the most, though, is down the stretch, Aaron Hanare was looking pretty dominant and was preparing to hit the Streets of Rage on Tama Tonga. And as they were falling into it, Tama was able to counter mid-air out of the Streets of Rage into a gun stun. And then, as a, sort of just discombobulated, Hanare's just standing there, like, Tama Tonga stands up, hits him with the second one for good measure, and puts his ass away. Like, a really cool finish.
Yeah, the finish was awesome. I popped for that. Yeah, that gun stun reversal. But yeah, I thought Hanare looked really great in this matchup. Again, it was another hard-hitting matchup here. I would say probably the only negative here for me was the full Nelson spot. So, Hanare's been using the full Nelson. He calls it the Ultima. It's something he beats Young Lions with. But he had it here on Tama, and, the ref's doing the whole, arm raise gimmick here. So, he raises Tama's arm one time, it drops. Raises it a second time, it drops. Raises it a third time, and it drops. Nothing happens, and Tama kind of fires up and breaks out of the full Nelson, which they even kind of brought up on commentary, like, why didn't Marty Asami call the match after the third arm drop? And I don't know if it was something where, Tama just kind of botched and didn't stop his arm from going down fast enough, or what the deal was. But that was a little clunky there into why that wasn't a ref stoppage. But they were able to kind of get out of that and led to the finish that we were just talked about. But that spot was a little bit weird.
Yeah, the spot was a little bit weird, but it was pretty, at the same time, still exciting to see him apply. What is that move called?
The Ultima.
Yeah, he applied the Ultima, and I mean, I sort of thought, like, oh wow, like like they're really going with this guy,
Yeah, and they had a great thing on commentary because the previous match with Shingo, he had Shingo in the Ultima. And instead of keeping it on, he switched and tried to do the Streets of Rage. And Cobb was saying on commentary, we told Hanare, don't let go of that Ultima. Like, you're strong, you got it in, nobody's going to break out. Don't let go of it. So with that commentary, I thought, oh, maybe this is he's going to keep the Ultima locked in, and that's how he's going to win.
Yeah, there seems to be that thing. We've talked about it. Several guys in New Japan have this tendency to lock in a pretty strong submission and then opt out of it for whatever reason to go for a different, impact finisher. We've seen it with Zack Sabre in the past. We've seen it with Suzuki. We've seen it with Sonata. So this is not really a new tendency. This is just another guy in a long line of individuals who do this for whatever reason. But I'd kind of like to see Hanare's Ultima face off with the Hurt Lock from Bobby Lashley. See who's got the stronger full Nelson finish.
You can throw in Chris Masters in there at the Master Lock.
Well, we all know Chris Masters has the strongest full Nelson finish there ever was. Who else did it? Did Ivan Putski used to do that? Someone else used to do it. I can't recall who.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I feel there was a couple other people who had full Nelson for their finisher.
We need Hanare to start doing Ultima challenges in the middle of the ring, in the middle of the show,
Yeah, bring out a young lion and be like, I'll give you X amount of yen if you can break out the Ultima.
Bro, he should challenge Shingo to a Ultima challenge match, and the match is literally, if you can break out of the Ultima, you keep your title.
Dude, that'd be hilarious.
And then he wins.
Yeah. Oh man. So great stuff here. Tama Tonga getting the win, but Hanare looked great in defeat here.
Yeah, Nari looked good in defeat. He moves on. His stock has been risen quite a bit in this tournament. Tama Tonga looks like an established champion, picking up the win, but we're kind of at a point where I don't know who his next challenger is going to be, but maybe it's going to be the winner of this match. Potentially, we'll see.
Yeah, so then the main event was Hiroki Goto defeating Kyle Fletcher 20 minutes and 43 seconds. And
this match was not necessarily, in my opinion, quite at the same level as Fletcher's previous match with Yoshihashi, but it was pretty close. And while I felt this match was a little bit slower in the early goings, it really picked up down the tail end stretch, and we saw some pretty crazy stuff. I mean, Kyle Fletcher did basically a moonsault off the top rope to the outside on Hiroki Goto, which we've seen, different people use that move in the past. Kenny Omega, Kota Ibushi, Hangman Adam Page. But I think Kyle Fletcher's taller than all of them. He's billed at 6'4". I don't know if that's legit, but I feel like it is. And that's pretty big for a guy his size to be hitting Hiroki Goto with a standing moonsault to the outside off the top rope. Like, that's kind of nuts.
Yeah. And Goto was doing some cool stuff in this match, too. He busted out that second rope sunset flip from the top that he usually doesn't do much more often, but busted that out.
That was a code red, right?
Yeah, code red off the top, yeah.
Yeah, that was incredible. There was a lot going down the last few minutes of the match. They hit a lot of incredible, believable near falls. Huge lariats, super kicks. Like we mentioned, that code red spot. Kyle Fletcher was able to successfully hit the spinning tombstone again on Goto, but for whatever reason, Goto was able to kick out of it where Yoshihashi wasn't. I sort of had to imagine for a second when that happened in kayfabe. I was like, well, I mean, Goto's been hit by spinning tombstone from Okada so many times at this point.
Yeah.
His neck's probably a bit more conditioned and using some King's Road logic here. Like, he's dealt with this before.
Yeah.
That's nothing new for him. But Kyle Fletcher hit a really incredible brainbuster at one point too, which I kind of wonder, Jeremy. Like, they call regular suplexes over there brainbusters. How do they react when they see a real brainbuster? Like, what's the nuance and the difference? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't really paid attention to what the Japanese call and see like what they call it, but
it's weird.
You gotta think they would pop bigger for a American brainbuster versus just a vertical suplex.
I mean, I do. I love when people get dropped on their dome. But
Cobb had a great line. He was like, "That's not a brainbuster," and Kelly's like, "Why?" He's like, "Go doesn't have any brains."
Yeah, there's one point where someone got caught in a submission and they went to the ropes. I think it was during the Tama Tonga Hanari match, and he's like, he went to the ropes. He's like, that's kind of weak, He's like, and Kevin Kelly's like, this is pro wrestling. He's like, yeah, but I feel like I, as champion, would never use the ropes to get out of a submission. That just makes you look weak.
Yeah.
And then Kevin Kelly's like, all right, Jeff, I'm gonna remember that the next time you're wrestling and you go to the ropes. But yeah, this match was really outstanding. And then Goto, he hit all his big trademark stuff, the GTR, the Ushigoroshi, all that, all his famous moves, and I think he actually had to hit Kyle Fletcher with 2 GTRs to beat him, correct?
Yeah.
So really, really spirited outing. I think that this was a match where a lot of people were expecting Kyle to pick up 2 wins to sort of solidify his tag title challenge, but to me, I sort of felt like Goto's such an established, veteran and sort of a not quite main event star, but he's a upper mid card level talent. You have a young Kyle Fletcher who it just seemed to me from the kayfabe perspective probably a bit of a stretch to think that he's going to beat both members of Bishamon and continue on in the tournament. I sort of felt like his story was done here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think you made a great point earlier where, Fletcher is coming in this match out of the War of Yoshihashi, where Goto had the first round bye. He's fresh, and so maybe Kyle Fletcher wasn't 100% going in this match.
Oh, this is off subject too. One thing that Kevin Kelly posited as a explanation for the buys, he mentioned all the champions that had buys, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like, well, what about the guys like Chase Owens and I forget who the other person was that didn't
Cobb
are not Cobb, and it's like, how did they get buys? And he was like, they were wild card picks.
Yeah.
I mean, New Japan didn't say that, but now that he's saying it, I'm just gonna retcon it into the logic, and I'm like, okay, I don't even watch sports, so I'm not sure how wild card works, but yes, that jives with me, I guess.
Yeah, it's viable.
It's viable, I suppose. Although it still doesn't make sense when like Shingo didn't get a first round bye, and he is the KOPW.
But he's a provisional champion.
He's a provisional champion, but he's got a gold belt. They gave Great O'Khan a bye as the champion of the British. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Well, yeah, he's the undisputed Rev Pro British heavyweight champion,
I guess. But yeah, Goto beating Kyle Fletcher makes more sense to me, and I think that he and Mark Davis did more than enough in this tournament to not only have a really great accounting for themselves and display their talents, but also showcase why they're deserving of another tag team title shot. And that combined with Kyle Fletcher's win over Yoshihashi and then him pushing Goto to the limit in their match, I think we'll see that title challenge come to pass here very shortly in the fallout of this match. But yeah, I think it makes more sense for Goto to kind of continue on anyways, just the fact that he's, a New Japan stalwart.
Yeah, and Mr. New Japan Cup, Mr. March. So I understand Goto going through, and I agree, like they can still tip the match after Fletcher's win over Yoshihashi, which could happen at the finals. We have the Hiromu Leo Rush on that show, so if you want to really build that final show up, you could throw on Bishamon versus Aussie Open there.
I see that as being more a Sakura Genesis match.
Yeah, it could do
that.
But
I just want to point out, Jeremy, I know that I haven't been perfect when it comes to predicting this tournament, but there have been a few big calls that I've made early on that have projected, like Goto being the guy to kind of go through, and a few other calls like that.
Yeah. We had a question here from Reddit user CPT88 Kirk. Do you think it's Goto time? I'm ready for a Goto shot at Okada.
Well, I've lived through... It's just that, like, okay, granted, when you watch a match like this, right, and you hear so many people that hand wave and dismiss Goto as being the Dolph Ziggler of New Japan and this, guy that can't get the job done and the perennial loser, I get all that. But when you see what he's still capable of doing when it comes to in between those ropes and in that ring, he's so talented, man. Like, he's still, and we forget that sometimes. I mean, he's every bit, in my opinion, I think he's every bit the same level of in-ring talent as a Tomohiro Ishii or Shingo Takagi. I don't think he's that far off from those guys. There's definitely something missing that doesn't allow him to get to those other levels, but it's not the actual in-ring work. He's so fucking good when he needs to be. And that's what he was here with Kyle Fletcher. But if I'm gonna sit here and tell you that they shouldn't be pushing Sonata in 2023, I just don't know that after 8 times challenging unsuccessfully for the IWGP title, and the last one being against Okada many, many years ago, that it's time for them to go to that well once again. Like, the deal here is this: if you're gonna have Goto challenge for the title, A, he probably shouldn't be a tag team champion. B, you really got to heat him up. And C, he has to win. There's no point in doing another Goto title challenge if he's going to lose again, unless they just want to set the all-time failed IWGP title shot, record.
Yeah, that would be pretty rough for Goto to eat another championship loss like that. So,
which I think he actually owns the record, but it would just be
cementing it,
broadening it even further.
Yeah. Another question here from OK890. Do you think both Aussie Open guys have a future as singles guys in New Japan down the line?
Well, we're going to talk about the Mark Davis match here in a moment. I don't know necessarily if they both have futures as singles guys in New Japan, solely like apart from the tag team, but it's viable. It's definitely something they could do if they wanted to.
Yeah, I think there is more upside in running with Kyle Fletcher as a singles guy. I mean, Mark Davis did great. We'll talk about the Ospreay match, but as far as a young guy, great size, great build, good looks, athletic, like hard hitting, fast pace, he can do flying. Like, he's a guy that I think it can make sense to invest in a singles run, kind of like, sometimes with Killer Elite Squad, you would do something with either Archer or Dave Boy Smith at times. So I think you can keep Aussie Open together, but I think you could also push Kyle Fletcher when they are not challenging for the tag titles.
Well, I mean, I don't even know long-term if they're going to stay with New Japan or if they're going to go somewhere else, because keep in mind, as far as we know currently, they're not even signed to the brand. So you have to kind of keep that into consideration. And since their whole career success has mainly been predicated on them being a tag team, I don't see them breaking up and going singles unless they have some sort of really major personal fallout that, doesn't allow them to continue to work together, or they're going to need to be signed, because they're going to need some sort of certain assurances from a company, whether it be New Japan or WWE or AEW or something, that their legacy, or not legacy, what's the word? I don't know what the word is. I'm tired. That basically that their that's the word, that their livelihoods have a certain level of insurance, because once you split up, for the most part, there's no putting the genie back in the bottle.
Right, yeah.
But I definitely think that both guys have the goods in almost every aspect of wrestling. Personally, I think they both could be top single stars or utility players in whatever manner you want to use them. But, it's one of those things. They're going to need to be signed. Like, there's no point in them breaking up and shooting their gimmick in the foot if they're not under contract somewhere.
Right, yeah, that could be detrimental to their careers if they potentially split, and then New Japan's like, no, we don't want to use you guys anymore. Then you kind of hurt that Aussie Open brand, like you mentioned. I guess can't come back together and continue with what they were doing.
I mean, the Rock and Roll Express did, but not everybody's the Rock and Roll Express.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to night 7 here, the last night. We'll review before we do the previews for what's coming this week. So we had Chase and Kenta defeating Oscar Lube and Ren Narita. Shota Umino and Tama Tonga defeating Fujita and Zack Sabre. House of Tortures, Dick Togo and Sho defeating Just Four Guys, Taichi and Taka. We had Aaron Henare, Great Okan, and Kyle Fletcher defeating Finley, ELP, and Gato. We had Bushi, Hiromu, Sanada, Shingo, and Naito defeating Goto, Leo Rush, Ishii, Yo, and Yoshihashi. And then our 2 tournament matchups, we had Evil defeating Jeff Cobb, 17 minutes and 42 seconds.
Kind of very similar in certain regards to the rant that I had earlier. Again, this is another match that was very lowly rated, and I think part of it is outrage from the fact that people like Jeff Cobb. People are fans of him. They're a fan of his style of working. And had he won the match, we would have had another, I almost called him Undisputed Era, United Empire interfactional match between him and Will Ospreay, which we haven't seen. We've seen those two wrestle before, but I don't believe we've seen them wrestle each other as United Empire members. Is that correct?
Right, yeah.
Okay. But instead, we're getting Evil versus Will Ospreay. And the one thing I will say, though, as egregious as the cheating was in the Renderita match earlier in the tournament, it was even turned up higher in the Jeff Cobb match. Maybe that's because they needed to protect Jeff a little bit more. But this was way, 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 way over the top when it comes to shenanigans and cheating. I mean, it was just so much of it. Putting all that aside, I thought the actual wrestling was fine. I thought the match was fine. I probably would knock it a little bit, but it was probably 3-star level, and then you dock it a little bit because of just how exhausting the cheating tropes really were.
Yeah, I think they were definitely going out of their way to make sure they protect Jeff Cobb and make it known, like, if this was a fair, clean one-on-one match, Cobb would have won. And, they did do the smart thing here. Cobb came out with the United Empire guys to try and fend off House of Torture, but House of Torture was able to kind of outwit those guys and lay them out and take them to the back, and they handcuffed Great Okan to the railing. He was on Japanese commentary, so he was stuck in the commentary position, and none of those guys could come out and make the save, and you had a 4-on-1 on Jeff Cobb, which eventually led to Evil hitting the Everything is Evil and getting the win here. And we had a question here from User Solid Deuce. How much should Marty Asami be fined for assaulting Evil?
What is he talking about? I don't know.
Well, there was a spot in this match where Evil was holding on to Asami, and he kicked him off. He pushed him off to allow Cobb to do the German suplex.
I forgot about that, but yeah, that's a funny joke.
And then that moves to the main event matchup where we had Will Ospreay defeating his United Empire stablemate Mark Davis, 20 minutes and 1 second.
Jeremy, I loved this match. I would go as far as to say, and I feel confidently about this, this is, in my opinion, the best match of the tournament so far. I just really loved this match, not only because we didn't expect necessarily to be getting a match between Will Ospreay and Mark Davis at this juncture of the tournament, so it was kind of even surprising to even get it in the first place. But then they were so liberal with the violence against each other. I mean, they were smacking this was one of the hardest hitting matches I've seen in New Japan in a long time, and that's really saying something, because it's strong style. It's a strong style company, and these guys were really whacking the shit out of each other. But not only was it the visceral violence that I loved, but it was the storytelling. Remember when there was no AEW and New Japan was the threat, and people used to say there was no stories in New Japan?
Mm-hmm, yep.
Well, there are stories, and they're called wrestling matches, and this one was an excellent one. And one of the things I loved was the fact that Will and Mark, being teammates, being so, traveling the world together, living together, having all this intimate knowledge of one another, Will was mindful enough to go after the damaged and surgically repaired ACL of Mark Davis. So not only was he kicking his knee and his upper thigh, but he started chopping his leg, which I don't think I've seen that I can recall in very many matches. He did it numerous times. And then at the same time, Mark Davis was able to use his speed and size and his knowledge of Ospreay's moveset to avoid a lot of pretty damaging maneuvers throughout the match. And they told a body part story within the match here, but one that was super violent, super high octane, very fast paced. And these guys just had such natural chemistry with one another. It was just really, really impressive. I mean, I loved this match, and Mark was able to showcase his power and his speed and his fluidity. Some of the things that he does are very Jeff Cobb-esque, but kind of even rival his athleticism to a certain degree. And it's kind of the reason I want to say, I know we talk a lot about how great Kyle Fletcher is, and the comparisons are going to be there because they're teammates. Granted, Mark Davis is a little bit older, and that's one of the probably marks against him. But when it comes to in-ring work, he is so fucking good, and so is Will Ospreay. And this match was really violent and very emotional, and it really sucked me in, and I loved it.
Yeah, this match was awesome, man. Ospreay was chopping the crap out of Davis. It was sounding off like a gunshot in that arena. That they were laying in the strikes. You know, they say you hit your friends harder, and they were definitely doing that here in this match. Will busted out this, he called it the storm driver, like a tiger driver kind of thing, where he did the double arm power bomb kind of thing to Mark Davis. That was crazy looking. Got a great,
it's almost like a kind of quad. I mean, you can definitely tell he's trying to allude to like a Gonzo bomb, but he's not dropping them quite that high angle. But it's pretty, impressive the way it looks.
Yeah, and so a lot of great just offense from both of these guys. Like you mentioned, Ospreay working on the legs, which kind of played into the finish of the match, where Davis was trying to fire up and his leg gave out, which let Will the opportunity to hit the hidden blade from the front and get the win.
Yeah, he ends up picking up the win here after Davis had avoided several what's that move called?
The Stormbreaker?
Not the Stormbreaker. His Hidden Blade. He tried to hit him with Hidden Blade multiple times, and he kept avoiding it. Ultimately, at the end, a Hidden Blade was his undoing. And I really love this match. It had incredible psychology, and it was very fun, very fast paced. The match just kicked ass. I mean, I'd probably go still 4.25, but this was just awesome. If you haven't seen it, I can't recommend it high enough. I mean, I might even think it's probably potentially contender for Strong Style Fight of the Year.
Yeah, it's definitely a go out of your way and watch. If you're one of those people who are just cherry picking the best stuff from the tournament, you definitely need to watch this match. Yeah, very hard hitting, great chemistry between these guys based off their real life friendship and relationship, and just a match like you were saying we didn't expect, and it delivered. It was awesome, and so with that win, Ospreay will move on to face Evil in the next round, and also with that win, we saw another United Empire member drop. At first they were all advancing, but we lost Cobb, Davis, Fletcher on this stretch, and Hanare. So Ospreay is now the only remaining United Empire member in the tournament.
And two, we forgot to mention is that during the shenanigans and all the chaos that occurred in the prior match, the House of Torture had gone ahead and handcuffed Great Okan, who was on commentary, to the barricade, but they never unhandcuffed him. So then the main event comes, and he's still handcuffed, calling the match between his stablemates. And then once the match is over, Will tries to come over and talk to him, and he's like, I don't have a key. So then he just has to cut his promo, and Okan's still shaking the
he's like help me. Will, help me. And then the funny thing is everybody has gone to the back, the crowd is leaving, and Okan is still handcuffed.
He's still handcuffed. It was so funny.
He's still trying to get out. The crowd's laughing as they walk by him to the exit, and he's just there really just trying to get out. It was hilarious.
Yeah, it was really, really good stuff. So, but he cut a post-match promo and promised that he's going to take out Evil, which I hope he does, but I don't know. That's a big match.
Yeah, especially
big stakes.
Yeah, if people think this whole Sonata LJ story thing is happening, all signs point more towards evil. But I guess we'll have to see what happens here. I mean, Ospreay, Sonata, they've had great matches in the past, and if you want to really heat up Sonata, I think a win over Ospreay would do a lot for him, especially if he's going to win this whole thing.
Yeah.
We had a question from Rambone Slam Pig. It says, who has overperformed in the tournament relative to your expectations so far? Who has underperformed? Is there anyone you think should be on the bubble for future tournament slots?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I don't. Who do you think is over or underperformed? I don't know. What do you think?
I think underperformed, I would probably say maybe Tetsuya Naito. Like, he's had
that's a good point.
Good matches, but when you look back at the ELP match, like, I felt like that had potential to be better. I feel like the Chase match could have been better. Like, he's having fun, like you mentioned, fine road to performances. He's not trying his hardest.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know this is going to sound a little crazy, but I do feel like Sonata's a little bit underperforming. I know he had the great match with Taichi, but it sort of feels like Taichi is the one that made that match.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Kenta match was, pretty abysmal. So considering all the tools that Sonata has, I feel like he might be underperforming especially considering at one point this was like his tournament. Like, we sort of expected him to really turn up during New Japan Cup, and I don't think that's happening right now.
Yeah. I know he's only had one match, but I would say
Finlay?
Dave Finlay has overperformed based off that banger he had with Ishii last week, and really just kind of establishing his new in-ring style and this new character that he has being a part of Bullet Club.
I would say, as far as overperforming, I think both members of Aussie Open have to be kind of in consideration, even though they're both out of the tournament at this point. They did fantastic. As far as underperforming, I know he's only had one match, but you have to mention Umino, even though it was a Yujiro match. He's got the Zack Sabre Jr. match on the docket coming up here, I think tomorrow or the next day. And that's going to be a big test, and that will kind of tell us a little bit more. But if he goes out there and he has an underwhelming performance against Zack Sabre Jr. as well as Yujiro, then he's definitely in territory for underperforming in the tournament.
Yeah. And as far as people who should be on the bubble, I mean, Yujiro, I know you need pin eaters, but I feel like there are other pin eaters you could rotate. Like, I would have rather maybe you throw Hanma in as a pin eater versus a Yujiro. I think he needs to stop being in tournaments at this point.
I could see Yano not needing to be in the tournament any longer as well.
Yeah.
But but I don't know if I would list anybody else in particular. I think that some of these guys that have been included, like Aussie Open, that will remain to be seen what a New Japan Cup looks like next year,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, well, let's preview the tournament matches that we have coming up. So tomorrow, March 15th, we'll have some more second-round matches. We'll have David Finlay versus Great Okan and Zack Sabre Jr. versus Shota Umino.
Those are both two matches I'm very much looking forward to. We haven't seen Great Okan in the tournament at all thus far. And, every year he's got his supporters and those people that think that he needs to be heated up and be given a big push. But it's got a huge obstacle in front of him in a surging David Finlay, newly rebranded Rebel Club version. So that this is going to be a good test for both guys. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I do think Great Okan, I'm in that camp that he needs to start winning more. He needs to get a push, but yeah, he's going up against a red hot David Finlay, who was, taking the mantle of being the Bullet Club leader, and they're doing this whole Bullet Club storyline. So unless there's some shenanigans where ELP potentially costs Finlay the match somehow, I'm thinking Finlay's going to get the win here.
I agree.
Then Zack Sabre Jr. and Shota Umino. We've seen Umino when he's in there with super talented people. He has some really great matches, and so I think Zack here will lead Umino into a great matchup here.
I don't know if I would put my confidence as far as you on the same level as you have, Jeremy, but I think that it's probably a likelihood that it will be a great match, just considering the fact that it's Zack. So I'm right there with you. But I'm thinking that Umino is going to beat Zack Sabre Jr. for the same reason that I predicted Shingo to take a loss to Hinare. It just seems to be the most logical step to establish another challenger for that TV title. And with it being a youth belt, Umino's right up that alley. And he really could benefit from a big win against an established guy like Zack, especially considering how many times he's won this tournament in recent years. So I think the match is going to be really good, and I'm looking forward to it. But like I said, there have been questions, even going back to some of those Will Ospreay matches in Rev Pro. There have been people who've been saying for a while that Umino isn't the full, complete, total package, and that something is missing. And I think a lot of those people that were saying that feel vindicated after his most recent singles matches. So this is going to be a big test for him, one way or the other.
Yeah, that leads to a question from Reddit user CPT88 Kirk. Says, I've heard a lot of flack for Umino's performance in his match against Naito, but my hot take is I'm not a big fan of Naito main event matches. I think Umino and ZSJ are going to have a strong match to show Umino is still on track to be great. Thoughts?
Well, I think you're echoing some of the sentiments we have about this match in particular. As far as I don't know. I believe this question or this listener is a newer listener to the show, and so maybe he hasn't heard necessarily like the times where we have had less than positive things to say about Tetsuya Naito, and then we got like buried for it all over the internet. But there's no denying how big a star Naito is, and there's no denying that when it's time for him to have a big match, like a really, really, really big match, next level, that with the right people, he can go and go out there and kill it. I mean, look at his series last year with Okada and Will Ospreay. But at the same time, this is just like I said earlier in the show, it's the same guy for every Ospreay match. There's other matches that should be really, really good, and they just aren't. And part of it is ring rust or like ring wear and tear, all the years that he's put on his body. Some of it is disinterest, some of it's politics, some of it is who knows what it is with Naito. But there are those people out there that still believe wholeheartedly. They support the guy to the nth degree. They love him. They're ride or die for him. They think he needs to be the head of the company and like be champion forever. But we on this show, or at least me speaking of myself, like we see his faults, we see his flaws. I understand. I agree with you to a certain extent. I don't blame all of that matches, mishaps on a green Shota Umino. I do think that it's a little bit of a black eye on Tetsuya Naito, who's supposed to be the person carrying a green Umino to a great match. Something that Will's been able to do multiple times, but Naito, for whatever reason on that night, wasn't able to do it.
Yeah, I think we've seen several main events. You mentioned Naito Suzuki. I can think about Naito and Kenta from Osaka before the pandemic. Like, there's been
Naito and Evil.
Yeah,
Naito and Jay White.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's been a lot of big Naito main events where they have not delivered, and some of that does fall on Naito. And like I mentioned previously with the Naito Umino match, I thought the whole match was just not even structured in a right way to help Umino at all. I feel like Umino was fighting an uphill battle for that whole match, the way it was structured and the way that Naito was performing there. So yeah, I do think that again, we talked about earlier about, veterans who are good with, young lions or rookies. And I don't think Naito is necessarily the best guy for that. And so obviously Will Ospreay is a great guy for that. And I do think that Zach can be great for that. And I know Zach can, if he wants to, eat up Umino here with his wrestling, but I feel
I'm sorry.
So I feel like this is going to be a great chance for Umino to really kind of show what he's got.
My feeling on Naito is basically this. You put him in there with a world-class guy on a big stage, meaning your Shingos, your Kenny Omegas, your Okadas, your Ospreys, or even like obviously Ibushi, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's going to go out there and he's going to have a killer match, just incredible. But with how much ring wear and tear he has on his body and everything, he just can't go out there and do that the way young Naito is a totally different story and a different guy than the one we have in 2023. And you put him in there with someone that's like, for instance, the Sonata match we're going to talk about. I don't know what that looks like, and I don't have high hopes it's going to act, even though it's interesting from a storyline perspective. I don't think it's going to be very good, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I just think that's where Naito is. Like, Naito's not somebody, and I know there are people that are listening that are probably angry and love the guy, but like, he's, from just a truthful standpoint, he's not somebody that can go in there anymore with someone that's lower than him and tear the roof off the place. When has he done that?
Yeah, I can't really recall a time when he did that. I feel like his great matches are always with people like you mentioned, the Okadas, the Omegas, the Tanahashis, Sabers, people that are really great, that are on his level, and he can have a great match with. But yeah, somebody that's below him, a mid-carder or a young lion or up-and-comer, those matches don't always end up being great.
No, I can't think. I mean, I guess we could dig through it, but there's been a lot of times where you'd think you'd have great matches and they're just not.
Yeah. So that moves into Night 9, March 17th, where we'll have Sonata versus Naito in one of the quarterfinal matches, and the other quarterfinal match will be Evil versus Will Ospreay. The show's happening from Cork and Hall.
This is where we're getting down to the nitty gritty, Jeremy, because Sonata is a guy. There's a narrative and there's a story behind him on this side of the bracket, whether that continues on after this match or not remains to be seen. And I think obviously Finlay on the other side of the bracket is kind of in the same boat, where there's a tournament wide story behind both those two guys, but neither of them right now feel like somebody that you can. Where are they doing Sakura Genesis? It's in Sumo Hall, right?
Yeah, I think so.
You can't fill a building that size with Okada versus either of them as it stands today. You have to really do some serious work between now and then to get a match like that prepped and viable. Whereas on the flip side, you've got established draws and stars in Naito and Will Ospreay and Zack Sabre Jr. And it's going to be interesting to see if they go with one of these more fresh-faced or less proven commodities than if they go with the status quo pick like a Tetsuya Naito. And it kind of depends on what your opinion is of the tournament moving forward. Like, is this just a tournament made for Naito and we don't see it, and that's what's happening, which is totally possible? Or even Will Ospreay. Like, we kind of, we've been a little dismissive of the idea. I sort of thought that Will would wind up against Yano so he could get Yano'd, so that there wouldn't be as much flack when he lost later in the tournament,
Yeah.
But now that he's got Evil in front of him and the rest of the LIJ trio on this side of the bracket, I'm like, maybe he just goes through and he wins. And maybe we're about to get a huge match between him and Okada. We don't even realize it,
Yeah, I mean, that would be incredible. I mean, definitely down for Ospreay Okada. But yeah, I think that with Sonata, I think either whether he wins or loses, there are creative things they can do to tell of his story. Like if he loses, that could be the straw that breaks the camel off his back, and he finally fully snaps and does something different and turns on Lij or leaves Lij. Or having him win could be something also too that gets him to leave Lij. So I think there's some different options they could do there with that matchup. And I guess, we'll see if this was a real push to get Sonata in the main event, or like you mentioned, if they're going to go status quo, go with Naito. Because I could easily see them doing a Naito Ospreay semifinal to kind of pick up back from the series of matches they did last year.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought of that because prior to the most recent couple of years, that just didn't seem like the kind of match they would do in a New Japan Cup semifinal. That sort of, in the past, has seemed more like the kind of match you would see in the first round,
Yeah.
Typically in a tournament like this, neither of these guys would be going that deep so that they would be in a semifinal against one another. So, some of these booking patterns are differing a bit from what I'm personally used to seeing from Gedo in years past, which is probably a good thing because it's keeping things fresh. But I don't know, man. I'm very, very, very torn on this whole thing because I see this not a story and I see where it could go. I think that all four of these guys have a lot of interpersonal connections and recent history with one another. Sonata and Ospreay, they had that feud over the US title last year, and Sonata was injured by Will and the referee stoppage and everything like that. Will and Naito, they had that incredible 2-match series. This would be like the trilogy match for them. Obviously, Sonata, Naito, and Evil all have the Lij ties with one another. So it's really hard for me to pick here. I will tell you this though, I'm not excited for either match because as much as I love Will Ospreay, I don't see him carrying Evil to, even if it is better than what we are used to seeing from Evil, it's not going to be a great match. And Sonata Naito, I know it's interesting on paper, but I just don't think it's going to be good either. I don't think Night 9 is going to be particularly strong.
Yeah, I think it's going to be definitely a more story-driven night than like a great match night. But like you mentioned, all four of these guys have chemistry. Like I could see Sonata Ospreay, Naito Evil, Evil Sonata. Like whatever way they go, it makes sense. There's history with the guys. There's a story to tell with all those different pairs of matchups. So it's an unpredictable night. It might not be a great match quality night, but it's very unpredictable because there's multiple ways it can go and it would all make sense.
Another thing I was thinking about is like, what if they're wanting to take the title off of Okada soon? Then the person in this tournament that maybe fits the bill for being able to take the title off of him, might be Will Ospreay.
Yeah,
you might have Will Ospreay win. I know he's won the tournament before, but you might have him win again and then have him just go through and. What if he beats Okada? And what if that's setting up something between him and Kenny? A big money match that we haven't even thought of.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people are just assuming that it would be a straight up, Will challenging Kenny again. But yeah, you could have Will win the world title and then you set up a big champion versus champion match. And Kenny's like, hey, I beat you for the US title in January. Now you're the world champ. I want to beat you for that too. And then whether that's in Japan or Forbidden Door 2, that's a huge money match with the stakes even higher now with Ospreay being the world champion.
Yeah, that's something I've thought of. I don't know. But, Naito obviously is coming off of the big Tokyo Dome win over Kijimuto, a couple other big wins recently. So he's also in contention. These are some pretty high stakes matches, more so than what we saw in the first 2 rounds of the tournament. So I'm very much at a loss here. I mean, gun to your head, Jeremy, what do you think's happening here?
I'm going to go with Sonata versus Evil.
See, that's what I've been predicting this whole time. I just didn't think that we would need to go through Will Ospreay and Tetsuya Naito to get there.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. I feel like they're trying to rehab Evil, and they're also trying to, push Sonata. So I think it would just make, with what they're doing, I think it makes the most sense to go Sonata Evil here.
I don't know what's going to happen in the next round, but I think we might be getting Sonata versus Will Ospreay again.
Yeah, and again, like I said, that they have history and they have great matches. So again, that could make sense. But I just feel like with the whole, if you want to go this whole LIJ kind of thing, beating Naito and then beating Evil, I think there's a story there.
I agree with you. I'm just at a point where so much of my bracket and predictions have been busted where I'm just at a loss anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer Ospreay to win, to get the better matches and lead to a better final. I would prefer Ospreay Sonata or Ospreay Naito, but hopefully they go that way. But we'll see. Okay, 890 asks, would Evil beating Jeff Cobb and Ospreay back to back hurt the UE's credibility in you?
No.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, again, Evil, formidable champion. They've kind of established him, and they've established that he can kind of beat anybody, so I don't think it hurts him.
It's a tough sport.
Night 10, March 18th. More quarterfinal matches. We'll have Hiroki Goto versus Tama Tonga, and then David Finlay versus the winner of ZSJ and Umino.
So I think there's definitely a possibility where you could have Goto beat Tama Tonga and be the next viable challenger for the Never title. And I think that's what I predicted so far. So that's definitely on the table, but David Finlay, I think he's the one person where I'm like very confident he's going through no matter what. So whether it's Zach or Umino, David Finlay's going to win. I think he's going to beat Shota Umino personally. And so with that in mind, the question I have to ask myself is David Finlay beating Tama Tonga a bigger deal, like more meaningful, or, him beating Goto?
Yeah, I think beating Goto might be the way to go, just because Goto is Mr. New Japan Cup, and plus he's a tag team champion. Whereas if he beats Tama, I think people will be thinking Finlay's going to get a Never title match in the future. And obviously, I know they've done stuff where you beat a champion and it doesn't actually lead to anything. We've seen that happen in G1 before.
Right.
But I feel like New Japan Cup is more of the tournament where they do try to connect dots on who's being who in the brackets for championship matchups. And so I don't think Tama needs to lose to Finlay if they're not going to go with a Never title direction.
Here's the only thing with that. What if David Finlay what if he's winning the tournament?
Mm-hmm.
If he's winning the tournament and he's getting a title shot against Okada, then it negates the win over Tama Tonga entirely. It's an afterthought, and it's not leading to anything. And that is a possibility.
Yeah, I just feel like you get a better setup of a Never title challenger by having Goto win than having to do something different if Tama just won.
I agree with you. The only thing I think detractors and people that are arguing against that might say is they might say Goto's in a tag team and he's the current tag team champions. And that would be like, a distraction from his story that he has going. But at the same time, this past year, even in January, February, we saw, Shingo involved in 3 different, major storylines simultaneously. So it's not out of the realm of possibility for Goto to be involved in 2 title, feuds.
Right, and we just saw Okada, the world champion, trying to get the tag team title. So,
right.
We've seen it happen. So yeah, they could do Goto, as a tag champion trying to get the world title.
Well, the interesting thing here is we're getting down to the nitty gritty, because by the time we come back to record next week, we'll be past night 11 and be heading to night 12, which is the finals. We'll be recording a day or two before the finals. So the semifinals are going to be taking place on March 19th, this coming weekend. And basically the final two of the left side of the bracket and the final two of the right side of the bracket will be facing off, and we'll know what the finals look like when we record this show next week.
Yeah. So yeah,
and I don't know what it's going to be. The only thing I'm very positive about is I think David Finley is going to the semifinals no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, I think Finley is going all the way to the finals.
I wonder if he should just win the tournament if he's going to the finals.
I mean, he probably should. I mean, he's the one guy that really does need to be, if he's going to be the Bullet Club leader, like he needs to be established as a main eventer, considering where he's come from. You know, he's kind of been just the mid-card guy. And so if he's going to be the Bullet Club leader, I think he does need to be established as a main eventer. And what better way to do that than having him win this New Japan Cup and having a matchup with Okada?
I also wonder if him beating Tama Tonga isn't more impactful because of the Bullet Club ties and because of Tama Tonga being one of the founding members and him having defeated Jay and all of that sort of stuff, you know?
Yeah, didn't even think about that. That makes sense.
It's very tough. This is a really, really hard one to call. I think I'm going to kind of go with what I think it's going to be Goto and Finley, and then Sonata and Will as the final two, as the final four on the 11th, or I'm sorry, on the 19th.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time choosing between that. Sonata, Naito, Evil, Will Ospreay night, but I think it's going to come down for the finals, Sonata and Finley.
I think so too, and also, well, I mean, maybe not. At the same time, like, I still have that. There's that thing in the back of my head where it's like it's Naito and it's Ospreay and it's the sumo. You know, it's whatever. Where is that show taking place?
I think it's Sumo Hall. Let me. Well, it's in Sonata's hometown. I know that.
I don't know where Seiya Sonata's from.
Hold on, let's see. I'm pulling up the schedule here. Let's see. New Japan Cup, Tuesday,
Sakura
March
Genesis
21st.
Ryogoku.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, they're doing Ryogoku. That's Sumo Hall, right?
Yes, Ryogoku Sumo Hall. Yep.
Okay, so. Part of me is also like, it's Sumo Hall. You need an Ospreay or a Naito to place, to play the foil to Okada. I'm like, if they do go with David Finley, they might as well just put the belt on him, probably. Like,
yeah,
super push, you know? So I'm very torn on this because I know that from a narrative standpoint, Sonata and David Finley makes the most sense, but from a business standpoint, I don't know if I have the faith in either of those two guys. Even as great as David Finley's doing, I don't know if I see that, and maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, and I just got some news that could affect this tournament.
Oh, yeah. Will's hurt. I forgot to bring that up. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah. So, yeah, we got the black and white lion mark logo here. Will Ospreay sustained shoulder injury, absent from Okayama event. So they have changed.
I forgot to tell you about that. We didn't even talk about it off the air. I thought you knew. Did you not know until just now?
No, look, I knew in the Davis match that he hit his shoulder on the guardrail and Davis was working over the shoulder, and then he was talking to Kevin Kelly afterward and saying, the shoulder's kind of banged up. I might have dislocated it. It hurts a lot.
I know where he got hurt. So what they said that basically when they did that spot where Mark Davis lifted the protective covering off the floor and put it over Will and then hit him with the running senton.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was when he did that. apparently Will says that he heard his shoulder pop. The reason I had brought up to you is I wasn't totally sure if this was a work or if this was, shoot or not. But they were saying, from what I read earlier today, that he's probably going to be off all the shows until potentially the Evil match, but he might not be medically cleared for the Evil match come the 17th.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it could be a work and a way to get him out of the tournament without beating him, or he could.
But they did the black and white though.
That's true, but
they never. I mean, say what you want about this company, but they never do the black and white logo if it's a work.
Yeah, unless they're trying to make it the work now, who knows? But
they could. I mean, you can't put anything past them, of course. But yeah.
So that changed up some matches. So some undercard stuff on the 13th. Looks like it'll be Nakashima versus Aaron Hanare, and then there's going to be a matchup where it's Goto, Yoshihashi, and Oiwa against Cobb, Davis, and Fletcher.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, what do you think? Again, before we jump into the final news and wrap up the show, what were your final four based off that? You've got Sonata and Evil.
Yeah, Sonata, Evil, and then I'm gonna go Tama Tonga. You talking me to Tama Tonga? I'm gonna do Tama, Dave Finlay.
One of the big reasons I'm not picking Tama Tonga is just it's Gaijin.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, too. They've never had an all Gaijin New Japan Cup final as well. So that's another thing I kind of have in the back of my mind as well.
Right, which is why I'm going Sonata and Evil on the left side.
Yeah.
So 2 Japanese on the left, 2 foreigners on the right.
The good thing is we're probably all wrong, and we'll find out by the time we record next week what's really happening.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So let's jump into the news here real quick and close the show out. So New Japan will return to Long Beach, California in May. The promotion announced its resurgence event will be held at the Walter Pyramid in Long Beach on Sunday, May 21st. Ticket for the shows will go on sale on Wednesday, March 15th, with prices ranging from $25 all the way up to $299. New Japan's Collision Weekend, Capital Collision / Collision in Philadelphia, has been announced. LIJ will be back in the U.S. Naito, Hiromu, Sonata hit DC and Philly. El Desperado will also be at both events, and Lance Archer will be competing on the Philly shows. NJPW's crossover event with Impact, the Multiverse United, on March 30th has some matches announced. We got Mickie James defending her knockout title against Deonna Purrazzo, Giselle Shaw, and Tokyo Joshi Pro's Miyu Yamashita. I also think that, from what I understand, Giselle Shaw is a transgender wrestler, so this might be like the first time ever an openly transgender wrestler competes for New Japan. It's also interesting because typically, because of their Stardom connection, I don't normally think they would have a Tokyo Joshi Pro wrestler on the show, but they do have Miyu Yamashita there, so that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Kushida will be taking on Josh Alexander. Will Ospreay versus Speedball Mike Bailey. Moose versus Jeff Cobb. The Impact World Tag Team titles will be defended by Chris Bay and Ace Austin as they defend against Bad Dude Tito and Shane Hayes, as well as the Motor City Machine Guns and Aussie Open. So we have a 4-way there. The X Division title will be defended by Trey Miguel. He'll put his X Division title on the line against 5 other men: Frankie Kazarian, Rich Swann, who's Jetify? That's
Kevin Knight.
Kevin Knight, Clark Connors, and Rocky Romero. Kenta will defend the strong openweight title against Minoru Suzuki, which they've been alluding to on the undercard of the current tour. And then Fred Rosser, Sami Callihan, PCO, and Alex Coughlin will be taking on Joe Hendry, Jared Kratos, Tom Lawler, and is that Tom Lawler? Yeah.
Yep.
And Eddie Edwards. The WrestleCon Mark Hitchcock Memorial Super Show will feature a match between Davey Richards as he teams up with Filthy Tom Lawler to take on Kenta and Brian Keith. There's another announced match for Bloodsport 9, Jeff Cobb versus Bad Dude Tito. New Japan announced Tamashii shows in Australia for 4/14 in Adelaide at the Hindley Street Music Hall, 4/15 in Sydney at Liberty Hall and 416 in Melbourne at the Croxton. I promise you guys, we will be watching those Tamashi shows at some point, one way or another, and we will be giving you a review. Josh from the We Work Stiff podcast put out a tweet that we reshared this earlier today from the World Series of Wrestling Australia event, where Robbie Eagles lost a singles match to TJP. I believe it was for an inaugural title. But after the match, TJP offered a United Empire band to Robbie Eagles. Robbie took the band, but didn't necessarily align with the United Empire. And there was a lot of buzz about this. We do have a question. Okay, 890 said, thoughts on Eagles potentially joining United Empire? I personally feel like United Empire already have the max amount of members you can have without a faction getting too crowded. TMDK, on the other hand, are very short on members and need a junior.
I don't know. I feel like United Empire makes more sense for Robbie for several reasons. First of all, it kind of fits the whole vibe of, everybody kind of being a part of a different country, a quote unquote different empire. You can get the Australia representation by having Robbie Eagles in there. I know they have Aussie Open too, but having him in there, and then also there's just that history with Eagles and Will Ospreay, and Ospreay initially giving Eagles like the Chaos, the flag, and getting him in Chaos, but then joining Bull Club, and then eventually joining Chaos and the Birds of Prey tag team. And even though Will, turned heel and left Chaos, we never saw any breakups between the Birds of Prey. Will just kind of went his way and Robbie went his way, so they never really established them having heat with each other. So I could see them kind of piggybacking up on that relationship and having Robbie, team back up with Will.
You're giving us a lot of lore, Jeremy. Just because there's a lot of lore doesn't mean he should be in the group. But you know what I think? The best person to ask this question to is Robbie Eagles. Maybe it's time we send out the Aussie signal and we call our good friend Robbie Eagles to make an appearance on Keepin It Strong Style, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, why speculate when we can get the man himself on the show and ask him the hard-hitting questions?
Yeah, the hard-hitting, unbiased questions that you have to answer even if you don't want to. And that's going to do it for the news. So we have one question here. I'll just ask the question since we're already here, and that's going to do it for the show. Green Plasma _49 said, has Gato's booking style run its course?
I don't know. I feel like his booking style has changed. I feel like COVID really kind of threw a wrench in his style and what he was doing. But we do know that all good bookers kind of have a lifespan, and maybe it is time for Gato to be rotated out. But overall, there's still some of the basic stuff he does that still works very well.
Yeah, we've kind of talked quite a bit about his booking tendencies and patterns throughout this show. And one thing I've noticed recently, and anyone that's been paying attention, is that they've been subverting expectations quite a bit, which is a good thing. At the same time, we are starting to kind of lull back into a more familiar pattern of booking schedules and that sort of thing, which I think is good to a certain extent, because a lot of Gato's successes really did rely on having a reliable roster and a reliable schedule to book around, which was thrown into flux during the pandemic. I think many of his successes are going to come back full circle here in the near future, personally. And I do think that there's a need for them to modernize and change things up just a bit. But there hasn't been enough failure at this point for me to feel like his booking style has run its course or is failing. I just think it needs to be tweaked a little bit and given the like a beautiful plant. You need to give it sunlight, you need to give it fertilizer and soil and all the the different things that are needed for it to blossom. And I feel like we're right now in the right condition for his booking to thrive. Next question, he said, why is New Japan World Video behind the quality of Wrestle Un? And then he puts a couple dots. I'm guessing he's talking about Wrestle Universe.
Yeah.
And
I think I copied it weird because Reddit was being weird at the time of day when I was trying to get the questions in here.
I just thought he was being funny. And I honestly couldn't tell you, but it is a laughable joke that we've had the same app and the same website for this many years with no discernible quality increase in its entire time.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy that, you look at Wrestle Universe and just the quality of their pay-per-views and their shows. And, New Japan World's been around for so long now. And, it's literally the same. Like, there's been no real improvement on the quality of their site. We still don't have a, proper mobile app. It's crazy.
Yeah. And that is going to do it for the questions. And we have decided to take a break from recommended match of the week and excursion match of the week. We had those recommendations last week. We will get to them next week, but there's a lot of shows to cover, man. I don't got the time to jump into Ishii and Naito this week. Like, maybe next week. Yeah,
busy week. We both had busy weekends, having to celebrate our women as well, and busy with work and stuff like that. So, and then, these New Japan Cup shows have been one right after another. So, we will catch up on the recommended matches next week. We'll also, hopefully, at some point, catch up on, like you mentioned, on Tamashi. And, and hopefully soon we'll also have Robbie Eagles on the show. So, lots of great stuff to come, but that's going to wrap up the show for this week. And next week, we'll be back to review more New Japan Cup action, talk about the finals of the tournament. So if you enjoyed today's show, please consider making a donation by visiting socialsuplex.com/donate and click on the donate button under the Keeping It Strong Style logo. Make sure you connect with us on social media. On Twitter, the show is at KI Strong Style. You can follow the network at Social Suplex. You can follow me at Jeremy L. Donovan on Facebook, facebook.com/Social Suplex. On Instagram at Social Suplex. On Reddit, you can follow me. I'm the Pro Black Guy. You can follow Josh, Keeping It Strong Style. Email me, Jeremy at socialsuplex.com. Check out all the other shows that we have here on the Social Suplex Podcast Network. One Nation Radio, hosted by Rich Latta and James Boyd. The Grave Consequences, hosted by Caleb and Maserati. All Things Elite, hosted by Floyd Johnson Jr. and Austin Tomowitz. The AEW Match Guide podcast, hosted by Sir Sam Brown. And the Great Match Generator, hosted by Danny Kugler. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating and review. And we will catch you next week on Keeping It Strong Style, the ace of podcasts.
Ichiban. Unless Robbie decides not to come on the show, then we're not really Ichiban.
Thank you for listening to Keepin' It Strong Style. We'll see you next time.
At Kroger, shopping with pickup and delivery is the same as shopping in-store. Same low prices, deals, and rewards on the same high-quality items. It's one small click for groceries, one big win for busy families everywhere. Start your cart today at Kroger.com. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
And right now, stock up on your favorites during the 10 for 10 sale. Mix and match participating items and get 10 for just $10 with your card. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
So, how does it feel when you play Roll Up to Win with Tim Hortons? Buy a hot or cold beverage using the Tim's app and find out. Roll in the app for a chance to win prizes ranging from free coffee and donuts to a Universal Orlando resort vacation or a sweet car. Oh, don't forget the TV. And this year, every roll is a shot at a $1,000 daily giveaway drawing for two $500 prizes. Roll up to win and get treated by Tim's. No purchase necessary. Account registration required. 50 U.S. and D.C. 18 plus entered by 4/2/23. See rules at rolluptowin.com for free entry or full details. Void in Florida and where prohibited.